All right. Good afternoon, everybody. As you are joining us, we're just going to give everybody a few seconds to come on in as attendees are joining, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Muy buenas tardes a todos y todas. Vamos a dar un par de minutos para que puedan ingresar todas las personas y luego ya comenzamos.
Good afternoon. As folks are joining us, my name is Dave Sepos, and I will be your facilitator.
Muy buenas tardes. Mientras ingresan más personas, su servidor Dave Sepos y voy a ser el facilitador de esta sesión.
We are just going to wait just a couple of more minutes or so just to ensure that parties are joining. We know how many registrants we have, and I'm just waiting to see those numbers in attendees rise up just slightly.
Nuevamente vamos a darle un par de minutos antes de iniciar. Sabemos el número de personas registradas y estamos esperando a que el número de asistentes aumente levemente antes de proseguir.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. At this time, I would like to formally begin the meeting. So by instruction, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Dave Sepos. I will be your facilitator, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a moment. You have joined the Commercial Harborcraft Technical Working Group meeting of Workshop 3 with a focus on technology, adoption, and implementation.
Muy buenas tardes. Iniciamos ahora oficialmente. Dicho lo anterior y iniciando esta sesión, me presento nuevamente, Dave Sepos, y voy a fungir como su facilitador para esta sesión y presentar mayores detalles de mi persona en un segundo. Nos acompañan ahora en el grupo técnico de trabajo de embarcaciones portuarias comerciales, taller número 3, el cual se enfoca en adopción e implementación de tecnología.
Thank you. Our translators for today, and I'll be getting into this next slide, Jenny, if we could please. Our translators are Carlos Diaz and Grisel Villafana. Would like to draw everybody's attention now to the language interpretation setup that we have for today's meeting. So at this time, I'm going to open up the interpretation setting. I'll pause and let Carlos introduce or say what I just said a minute ago.
Muy buenas tardes. Ahora les voy a presentar las instrucciones para la interpretación en español. La interpretación le estarán ofreciendo Carlos Díaz de León y Grisel Villafaña.
So at this time, if you click on, everybody on here on the meeting should have a globe icon down on the bottom that says interpretation. And if you click on that globe icon, it will open up a screen that looks similar to what you can see on the screen. Carlos? At this time, what everybody should do is you should select the language that you wish to hear in. You will need to select two things. One is the language that you will wish to hear in, and the other is to select, and this is critically important, which is to mute original audio. So you will need to select the language that you wish to be hearing in, and also select the mute original audio. If you do not do that, when you try to speak a little bit later, we may not be able to hear you. So at this time, we should have everybody into their respective language channels. And Carlos, I will double check with you. Can you hear me? Okay, very good. All right, at this time then, we will go ahead and move on. Next slide, please. So at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to Bono Soriano, who is the Chief of the Freight Activity Branch for CARB. Bonnie, at this time, will have a few opening comments, and then she will hand it back to me to cover a couple of logistics, and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the third technical working group meeting for the Commercial Harborcraft Regulation. We also call it CHC. So if you hear that, you know what that's about. I'm Bonnie Soriano, the branch chief for the Freight Activity Branch, and this branch houses the CHC program team. At this meeting, we also have staff from our enforcement division and our legal office. Just for some high-level background, I know those of you that have been in the meetings before have heard this, but some of you are new to this meeting. And so I just want to give you some background. The technical working group came from a direction from our board during the rulemaking process. In Resolution 22-6, approving the amendments to the Harborcraft Regulation in 2022, CARB's board directed staff to form a technical working group to keep the board updated on two topics. These topics were: one, assess the commercial availability of the cleanest, lower emitting combustion engines, and two, the zero emission technology advancements for all categories of harborcraft. They also directed us to report back to the board by the end of this year and every 2 years until 2032. So this is an ongoing process. The technical working group is public, and we welcome all affected stakeholders, environmental and community-based organizations, technology developers, engine and after-treatment manufacturers, academic institutions, government agencies, and members of the public. And as we said, today is the third of the 3 planned meetings for this year, so this is the last of this year's meetings. These meetings will contribute to informing our report to the board, which, as I mentioned before, is due at the end of this year. The first meeting was foundational. We had overviews of the regulation and common technologies used to meet the requirements, and also impacts to the affected communities. The second meeting was focused on technology advancement. We talked about both the availability of cleanest certified marine engines and the progress of zero emission technologies. This third meeting is focused on the U.S. Coast Guard requirements and their processes, and we also have 2 panels. These panels have been an important part of this process, and in the panels, we tap into the expertise of the owners and operators that speak directly about their experiences and expertise. I want to thank all the panel members in advance. We know that you guys are busy and you're taking time out of your day to help us. And so we really appreciate your participation and your expertise. And also want to thank our CARB moderators, Nick Taylor and Andrew Damiano. To assist us in this process, we've contracted with California State University, Sacramento, and Dave is our meeting facilitator today. And big thanks to him. Also, a big thanks to the interpretation services, and that reminds me to maybe slow down my speaking a little bit so that it helps the translators when we're not, speaking 100 miles a minute. And as was presented in the last meeting, the University of California, Irvine is performing a technical written assessment, which we'll also use to inform our report to the board. A little bit about clarifying what these meetings are not intended to include. These are not structured to answer case-by-case implementation questions. If we do have those questions, we'll hold them to the end. If there's time to discuss, we will, but if not, we'll determine how to follow up on them and the best way to follow up. This meeting itself is not a formal rulemaking process, but it is a reflection of our board's direction to inform and update the board. As we begin this meeting, we would like to recognize the wealth of perspectives and expertise that this group brings to the table, and just want to thank you all for joining us today. And lastly, I would also like to recognize the contribution and thank Adriana Chavez, one of the members of our team and air pollution specialist on the Harborcraft team. She hasn't really been a public-facing participant, but she's done a huge amount of work behind the scenes. Many of you have coordinated with her, gotten many emails, and so I just really want to thank her coordination. I think without that, these meetings would not have been as productive and as successful as they were. So thank you, Adriana. We really, really appreciate your coordination. And I'm gonna pass it on to her for a minute to say a couple words and then have her turn it back to the facilitator for me. So, Adriana?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the acknowledgement, and thank you for the opportunity to lead the coordination of this meaningful discussions. I am truly grateful, and I thank the technical working group team and also the freight technology section for all the support, because at the end of the day, it's all about teamwork. Thank you very much. And I pass it over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Jenny, if you could advance the slide at this time, please. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is briefly go through the agenda, go through some logistics for today, some of which I'll repeat periodically throughout the day, and then we'll move on to our first session. So as noted on the screen in front of you, our first session today will be a best practices presentation that will be provided by the United States Coast Guard. We'll then go into a Q&A portion. We'll have a polling question that I'll speak to in a little bit more about the logistics of that. And then we'll take about a 5-minute break. And then we'll go into session 2. And session 2 will be a sequence of 2 different panels, one focusing on implementation and the second focusing on Tier 4 repowers. Now, before we get into that, I want to go ahead and just cover a couple of logistics. Regarding the attendees, I've done a quick check, and at this time, I do not see any duplications of names. We know that sometimes it is easier for folks who wish for other folks that they know to attend to just simply send a registration link. And then what happens is that we have more than one person showing up at this. Shared that with anybody. I'll be double checking that, and I'll be looking to make sure that people can go in and click on the little 3 dots and then go ahead and change their name. We want to make sure that we've got an accurate representation of who is attending. Regarding Q&A, I'll cover this quickly now, and then we'll go into it a little bit further later. There is a Q&A function that allows you to click down onto the box of Q&A and enter a question. Should you wish to read that question yourself, that is fine. When we get to Q&A sections, we'll have you raise hand. Commonly in these workshops, we've been doing a lot is where I will read the question on behalf of folks. It moves things along more efficiently. However, if you would prefer to read your own question, that's completely fine. What we'd ask that you do is go ahead and use the raise hand mode. That way I will know that you're in the queue, and we'll come to you, make sure that you're unmuted, and then you can read your own question. But again, by virtue of you typing that question in, as opposed to just simply speaking to it, it lets us be a little more efficient, and more importantly, we get a very accurate summary of the specific question that you have. One thing I also want to note is that you may note down on the bottom right-hand corner of the slides, there is a page number or a slide number. That might come in very handy for you during Q&A or prior to Q&A, so that if something pops up and you think you want to pose a question, if you want to make reference to that slide number, that allow us to navigate quickly should we need to a very particular slide. So just make note of that. Regarding the poll, as I noted, there's a quick poll that will be made. Well, I will open for you when we go to the break. It's just a kind of a get to know you poll and to kind of understand who we have attending today. We have 109 people attending right now. So it's just a way of us getting a little bit of a demographics, if you will, of who's attending. Next slide, please. So again, by way of introduction, my name is Dave Cepos. I'm Managing Senior Mediator and the Director of the Sacramento State Consensus and Collaboration Program. I have a colleague of mine that's attending quietly off in the shadows today, Corin Chopin, and he will be supporting us if we have any technical glitches. My job is to support this meeting and move things along efficiently, make sure that everybody's points and interests are heard, and that panelists are likewise being responsive to the questions to the extent that they can, and that, as noted here, things are being heard and thoughtfully considered. And then beyond that, my job is to frankly get out of the way and let the meeting be the meeting. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the technical working group composition and guidelines. These meetings are workshops. They're open to the public. They've included invitees as panelists and presenters, and you will be seeing them today and hearing them today. There is a website for the technical work group, and at that website you can find all the materials, including videos both in English and Spanish from the prior two workshops. So you can avail yourself of that. Again, as noted here, these represent, and our goal is to represent a cross-section of panelists that have been invited by CARB that are being directly affected by the CHC regulations or affected in some other related way. Our goals of meeting guidelines, everybody here in this meeting today has attended meetings and I'm sure is used to this idea of guidelines. We ask that when we have speakers, the speakers and panel speak at one time, that people that are being granted an opportunity to pose questions do so in a respectful way. I ask that whenever we open up the floor, particularly for Q&A, if somebody wishes to read their question, please identify yourself by name, and if you have an organizational affiliation, it would be great for you to please identify that as well. And again, I'll remind you of all that, but that's just the basic general rules. And as noted, a couple other things, we do have a charter. This process does have a charter that helped guide things along the way. And should you want to observe that charter or read it, that can also be available at the technical working group website. Next slide, please. So Bonnie already covered this a little bit, but just to reiterate, there have been 2 prior workshops. The information is listed there above. Today, obviously, is workshop 3. The objectives for today is to hear from, excuse me, U.S. Coast Guard District 11 to present on design change and review and completed work inspection requirements. And then the second objective is to have the panel discussions as noted and get feedback from folks on their experiences, pose questions, and have an open dialogue, time permitting. Next slide, please. Should you have comments on this process, CARB considers comments submitted by any member of the public as directed by Resolution 22-6. Using input from the technical work groups, workshops, and other data gathered, staff will prepare a report and submit it to the board, again, as Bonnie had already spoken to. Please submit your comments as early as possible. You can see the email there below is harborcraft@arb.ca.gov. For those of you that are on the phone, again, I will state that. The email address for submitting comments is harborcraft@arb.ca.gov. We ask that any comments that are provided be provided by the 31st of this month, August 31st, and that you include in that subject line technical working group. Next slide, please. So with that, we are going to transition to our first presentation. Mike, I want to make sure that you are unmuted from the Coast Guard. This first session is on best practices, United States Coast Guard design change review and completed work inspection requirements. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Mike Boyes, 11th Coast Guard District Inspections and Investigations Branch. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Boyes, and I work in the Inspections and Investigations Branch of the 11th Coast Guard District in Alameda, California. We provide oversight of all aspects of commercial vessel safety, waterfront facility inspections, and marine casualty investigations. Today, I'll be discussing U.S. Coast Guard vessel plan review, repowers, retrofits, and novel designs, CARB's commercial hovercraft regulation may require vessel owners and operators to conduct a repower and retrofit of their vessel. If this is the case, owners and operators will need to engage with the local officer in charge of marine inspection in order to ensure the repower is done under the appropriate regulatory authority. Next slide, please. Today, I plan on covering the following topics: reasons for Coast Guard oversight, vessel repower guidance, including plan review process, items to consider, light ship change, diesel particulate filters, and design verification. And finally, the process for novel vessel designs. Next slide, please. So reasons for Coast Guard oversight. All items of equipment installed on vessels subject to Coast Guard inspection and certification must undergo inspection and approval. The key considerations in judging equipment quality and suitability are: 1, safety of the vessel. The owner must consider potential fire hazards, explosion hazards, failure of watertight integrity, and the risks involved if the equipment fails to function. 2, safety of personnel. The onboard equipment must provide the maximum practicable safety for passengers and crew. 3, performance of a safety function. The life-saving equipment and firefighting equipment must perform immediately and effectively in an emergency. 4, safety of the port and waterways. The vessel must be in a seaworthy condition for the services in which the vessel is to be operated to effectively maintain the marine transportation system. And 5, the environmental protection. The shipboard equipment must be designed, constructed, and certificated to prevent the discharge of oil and other substances from the vessel. Next slide, please. So plan review and inspections of new or existing vessels and our engineering systems are required for commercial vessel certification. Coast Guard is responsible for inspecting the installation of the machinery, but we do not directly approve the equipment. Only approve its safe integration into the vessel systems and its operation. So essentially, the Coast Guard concentrates on a global or a whole of vessel safety and engineering plan review with the expectation that all systems are integrated safely rather than the individual machinery approval. In the case of commercial hovercraft regulation, we do not approve Tier 4 engines or DPFs, but we will ensure that the engine you choose to repower your vessel with is a marine type engine suitable for the intended service, designed and constructed in conformance with the requirements in 46 CFR, subchapter F, and that the associated equipment on board is suitable for the size engine chosen in your vessel. Next slide, please. So what is done during a plan review? The local officer in charge of marine inspection, or OCMI, acts as the project manager for vessel repowers, rebuilds, new construction, and repairs. The Marine Safety Center, or MSC, assists with plan review on these projects. MSC has provided guidance on what needs to be submitted for plan review and which office will review and approve the plans, either the OCMI or MSC. For example, the guidance for T-boats is provided in the Marine Safety Center Technical Note 01-03, and the checklist in the graphic provides a good overview of any certificated vessel. So for example, since it's hard to see in this graphic, the machinery branch at MSC will cover the engine exhaust system, the engine cooling system, and fire main system, among other items. The small vessel branch will review general arrangement plans, stability, and structures. And the electrical branch will review electrical plans, fire detection systems, and steering gear controls. The OCMI will provide additional guidance on what is needed and if the MSC will need to be involved in the review and approval process. Next slide, please. The MSC assists the OCMI by reviewing detailed plans for the design, construction, alteration, and repair of certificated commercial vessels to ensure they meet the minimum standards for hull structures, stability, and engineering systems, among other items, as set forth in the CFR. As the MSC only reviews plans that it receives, project management of any vessel is the responsibility of the cognizant OCMI. Project management by the OCMI includes providing direction to the MSC and managing submitter expectations. cognizant OCMI should communicate to vessel representatives and the MSC which plans will be sent to the MSC for review. For vessel designs using unique or novel arrangements and/or those plans for which a variance from the regulations is proposed, it's recommended that the plans be discussed with the OCMI prior to submission to the MSC. Any particular areas or issues of concern identified should be noted by the submitter prior to forwarding the plans to the MSC. Next slide, please. For owners and operators, it's important to keep in mind that the size and the horsepower of the engine is based on the size of the vessel. So a new engine should fit within the available space and allow suitable access around the machinery to aid with inspection and preventive maintenance. Coast Guard is not responsible for issuing type approvals of engines and their performance. It's the engine manufacturer's responsibility to ensure the engine systems are approved and certified by the US EPA for marine use and the applicable emission requirements. Some items to consider for project planning include piping system, including the fuel system, raw water cooling, detached bilge and/or fire pumps, the exhaust system. Any upgrades shall meet standards and be mindful of the additional weight for the stability test. The electrical system, sure to include a single line electrical diagram. The propeller and the propeller shaft. The repower may require upgrades to the prop, shaft, strut, and bearings. Propulsion engine controls, ensure any controls meet the standards in the applicable subchapter of 46 CFR. Performance checks. So once the installation is complete, schedule an inspection with the OCMI to check operations. The new engine must go through an acceptance inspection in the presence of a Coast Guard Marine inspector to verify installation and performance on the water. This will include checking the vessel's operation at each power level, ease of starting, shifting, and shutting down, for example, and the effectiveness of the cooling system, the combustion air supply, engine compartment temperature, exhaust system, and fuel delivery system. Owners and operators must obtain all pertinent instructions and procedures from the engine manufacturer to ensure the engine operates at an optimal level. And then finally, a stability review. So once everything is complete, a complete stability evaluation is required. It will need to be conducted by the local OCMI. Next slide, please. Lightship change is the process for determining when weight changes to a vessel are significant enough to warrant a new deadweight survey or full stability test. So the lightship is defined as the mass of the ship in metric tons without any consumables such as cargo, fuel, lubricating oil, ballast water, etc. It's essentially the weight of the ship when it was built. Changes to the vessel through the addition, removal, or relocation of items, which are included as part of the vessel's lightship, could jeopardize the accuracy of the lightship characteristics. Minimizing the adverse effects of weight changes is a key element in preserving confidence in the vessel's stability analysis. A complete stability test is normally required when modifications to the vessel's structure or arrangements could adversely affect stability. In some cases, however, small weight changes may not be significant enough to warrant a full stability test. Therefore, an evaluation must be made as to whether or not a vessel needs to undergo a deadweight survey or a full stability test following any change to the lightship. So the MSC will determine whether calculations alone are sufficient in lieu of stability test or deadweight survey based on the accuracy of the calculations and the application of appropriate conservative assumptions in the vertical center of gravity. So what are the thresholds for determining what is required after changes are made to your vessel? Well, when the total aggregate weight change of the vessel does not exceed 2% of the currently approved lightship displacement and longitudinal center of gravity, does not shift by more than 1% of the vessel's length between perpendiculars, weight moment calculations are only required. The total aggregate weight change between 2 and 10%, a deadweight survey only is required. And finally, when the total aggregate weight change exceeds 10%, a full stability test is required. If you need additional information on this, you can refer to Marine Safety Center Technical Note 04-95. Next slide, please. Coast Guard regulations do not explicitly address diesel particulate filters, or DPFs, installations on board commercial vessels. As such, there's no formal Coast Guard type approval for this equipment. However, for vessels that submit system plans for DPF installations, those plans will be reviewed and approved for proper design and materials in consideration of the system pressure, temperature, and other factors. The Coast Guard's primary concerns regarding DPS relate to their impact on engine performance, which may affect vessel maneuverability and the potential as another hot surface. That could be an ignition source for various flammable or combustible fluids or materials. Accumulation of particulate matter on the filter cartridges may cause back pressure to exceed engine specifications. Failure to properly regulate back pressure could lead to unacceptable back pressures on the engine, potentially resulting in a loss of propulsion. Additionally, the heat created by the regeneration cycle on a DPF could create a thermal runaway event and potential safety issue on some of the vessels currently in service, particularly those of wood or fiberglass construction. Depending on the vessel type, the Coast Guard may require updated fire load calculations that consider the DPF installation. This involves calculating the potential heat release from the DPF. Materials with higher flammability or heat release potential will affect the fire load. Now, fire load calculations are typically done for subchapter K vessels, but the fire risk mitigation is still considered during the plan review process, regardless of vessel type. So consideration will need to be given to the added equipment on the vessel. And in the case of retrofitting to DPF, the potential for the increased heat release and subsequent increase in engine room temperature, which may affect the existing ventilation, the insulation, and the fire suppression system. The MSC and OCMI will tailor their review process to ensure that all vessel types remain compliant with fire safety regulations while effectively integrating the DPF systems. The MSC may require enhancements or modifications to existing fire suppression systems to accommodate the DPF installation and additional machinery on board. Although we believe that with enough prior planning, DPS can be safely integrated into new vessel designs, we're particularly concerned about retrofits where not enough consideration has been given to the specific engine installation, its condition, the exhaust system in totality, and the areas where the exhaust system passes through. So as such, the Coast Guard would expect any DPF that's retrofitted to be acceptable to the specific engine manufacturer. Additionally, due to its location within the exhaust stream, the DPF may impact engine performance and therefore vessel maneuverability. So DPF should be provided with appropriate monitoring and alarms. So it is likely that the MSC and a Coast Guard Marine inspector will need to review each specific DPF installation for suitability and acceptance. The final approval is at the discretion of the cognizant OCMI. Next slide, please. Design verification is a process that's been designated strictly for 46 CFR subchapter M vessels and allows for third-party organizations to also conduct verification procedures. So it's essentially the same as a plan review, just as defined for subchapter M, and verification can be done by a professional engineer, an authorized class society, or the Coast Guard. So the process involves reviewing individual plans, drawings, schematics, calculations, or other documents necessary to demonstrate compliance with the construction and arrangement design standards found in the appropriate subchapter. The Coast Guard will refer to, and as appropriate, mark those plans, drawings, etc., that have been verified to comply with the required standards as verified. So for more information on the design process for subchapter M vessels, you can refer to Marine Safety Center Technical Note 01-17. Next slide, please. To facilitate innovation in the maritime domain, the Coast Guard Office of Design and Engineering Standards, or CGENG, has the authority delegated throughout specific sections of 46 CFR to consider equivalence to the regulatory design standards. Through the Design Basis Agreement, or DBA, process, the Coast Guard will evaluate alternate arrangement or novel design proposals to ensure that the arrangement, fitting, appliance, apparatus, equipment, calculation, information, or tests provides a level of safety equivalent to that established by the applicable regulatory standards. Review and approval for all exemptions, waivers, equivalencies, or relaxations from the administration is needed prior to the execution or the issuance of associated certificates or documentation. The MSC has the authority to make interpretations of regulations during the plan review of vessels. Generally, a request for interpretation or equivalent should be submitted to the MSC via the Cognizant OCMI. MSC will then determine if the request falls under its authority. The MSC determines the conceptual design requires a unique and well-documented framework of standards. It will coordinate with E&G, who will lead the review of any application for a DBA. Discussions with the Cognizant OCMI on potential vessel design or arrangement equivalency should occur as early as practicable. The OCMI should consider the scope of the proposal and contact the MSC regarding any regulatory deviations which may impact the plan review of a vessel. The OCMI zone is yet to be determined. Owners or designers of vessels should contact the MSC for discussion on potential vessel design or arrangement equivalencies. The MSC will then coordinate with E&G. E&G considers each design concept on a case-by-case basis. As needed, E&G may request submission of a DBA application. The DBA review process typically requires a thorough, holistic review of the application, ensuring that a suitable design framework is implemented on the novel vessel. Not all equivalencies will need to go through a DBA process. It's quite common for the Coast Guard to evaluate single system or equipment equivalencies on their own without the need for a larger design concept evaluation. During consideration of an equivalency, the Coast Guard will determine the need for a DBA. For more information on design basis agreement submission guidance, you can refer to the E&G policy letter, CG ENG 01-23. Next slide, please. This is just a visual representation of the design basis process lifecycle, from the role of the vessel designer to the role of the OCMI once construction is completed and a certificate of inspection, or COI, is issued. For those vessels that are repowering and going through a plan review process instead of the full design basis process, they'll eventually follow the same business process lifecycle minus the inclusion of E&G. But it's important to note that once a plan review is conducted and approved, the OCMI will oversee the construction or repower of the vessel. Once complete, and all tests are satisfactory for the attending inspector, a new or amended COI will be issued. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation, and appreciate CARB for allowing us the time to speak with everyone, and I can now take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. Much appreciated. So let me remind folks of how we will handle Q&A. There is a Q&A function that you should see on your icon list down on the bottom. You can go ahead and type that in if you don't mind. We can also call on you by raising your hand, and I will do so. We have a few questions that have already come in, so I'm going to just go in order that they've come in. The first one is actually really a question for CARB, so I'm going to go to that one, and then we have a few more that have already come in. So the first question is from Sam Peyrovi, and I'm going to apologize in advance to all attendees. I will do my absolute best to make sure that I am pronouncing names correctly, but my apologies in advance if I do not do that. Sam asks, most of the program is focused on Tier 4 repowers. Why is there not a similar or greater focus or benefit to new builds that go even further in creating not only zero emission, but much more efficient and modern vessels? So Tracy Haynes at CARB, I'm going to look to you if you can unmute yourself and bring your video up, and we'll go to you on this one, and then I'm going to continue with the queue.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so the topic of Tier 4 engine repowers in particular was one that came up frequently during the rulemaking process and since, so we did feel it was important to have a panel discussion focusing particularly on that topic. But the second workshop that we held a couple months ago did include a discussion that focused on new technology and new builds, in particular zero emissions. So if you weren't able to attend that second workshop, I recommend going back and looking at the recording and the materials that are posted. And then we also welcome questions and discussion on new builds for Tier 4s in these Q&A sessions too.
All right, thank you very much, Tracy. I'm going to move on then to the next question, which is from Frank Ursiti. And this will go to Coast Guard. So Mike, I'll forward it to you, and then you can let me know whether you want to handle it or see if you want to forward it to one of your colleagues. We see a lot of stability approvals taking an abnormal amount of time with respect to retrofits. Do you see this process improving?
Thanks for your question. I appreciate it. I know that a lot of the stability reviews are done at MSC. So if I don't mind, I'm going to throw it over to one of my colleagues over there to help answer the question.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Rachel Thomas from the Marine Safety Center.
Let me, as we're doing that, let me look to some of your colleagues who may choose to field this, and I will pose the question again. Again, this is from Frank Ursiti. We see a lot of stability approvals taking an abnormal amount of time with respect to retrofits. Do you see this process improving? So members of the Coast Guard or staff thereof, if you wish to weigh in on that one, please unmute yourself and turn on your video, and we'll come to you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Hi, this is Thane Gilman from headquarters. I don't believe we have any MSC folks on the call. And I'm not a naval architect, so I'll try to answer it as best I can. I think, you know, a lot of it depends on the complexity. And as Mike showed in one of his slides, I believe, you know, it all has to do with the amount of weight that you're adding. So, you know, I believe the goal at MSC is to respond, you know, at least within 30 days. Now, that doesn't mean that the final answer is given. You know, a lot of these projects tend to involve changes as you're going along at the shipyard. So things like that can definitely add to the process. So I would just the only thing I could say is to keep you know, following up even after, you know, a week or so, to make sure that the request was received, and, you know, if there's anything else that's would be required by the Marine Safety Center. Thanks.
Thanks, Thane, and I can follow up. MSC's on the line, but they're having trouble with their mic. Typically, the turnaround time on a lot of these is 30 days. 15, I guess, is a professional engineer ends up reviewing the plans beforehand. And typically, and from what MSC is saying, they haven't had any backups, but typically they'll try to get to a lot of these plan reviews within 30 days and get back to you. So if there is a hang up, I'd recommend talking with the Cognizant OCMI with whichever region you're in, and then also following up with the MSC. So
Let me do a thank you, Mike. Let me do a logistics check with a couple folks. I know that it looks we're monitoring things and sort of communicating offline amongst us on technical items. Now is a good time to reiterate that those of you that joined, if you had already gone into the interpretation mode and click on that little globe, there were two things that you needed to do. One was to select the language that you wished to be hearing the meeting in. And the other, which is critically important, is mute original audio. You must click that. If you don't, you may be trying to speak and we will not be able to hear you. So just as a reminder to that regard. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the next person in the queue, which is actually one of our panelists, Jerry. So if you can mute yourself and also introduce yourself, if you would, please, and then we'll have you pose the question, and then we'll continue on with others that are in the queue.
Okay, first thing, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, and the second thing is I'm unable to type in questions in the Q&A. I don't know if that's
No panelists, and for all panelists that are on board, you will need to raise your hand to pose a question, which is fine.
Okay, Mike, this is to you and your team. I'm Jerry Allen with Voss Maritime. I have a considerable amount of new builds and repowers under my belt, so I have faced some of these challenges, but as we get into this DPF thing, and as you might expect, that's our a big focus of industry and all of us doing these repowers and new builds, based on these DPFs running over 1,000 degrees temperature, going up in the upper engine rooms. And it's kind of a two-part question is first, looking at what type of approval is from your guys in the primary process for equipment and your role in our safety, which is, our role safety, your role safety also. Have you seen any of these DPF companies, there's quite a few of them, looking to get type approvals for this equipment? And that would bring me to the second part of my question, and I'll do it all at once and I'll go quiet and let you answer. Under subchapter M, which most of our vessels, but not all of them, fall under, because we do have some passenger carrying vessels, it appears a 143.210 that, and you even bring it up, the novel design, that we're looking for some kind of certification to tell us this equipment is safe. It seems to say that the commanding officer of MSC may be able to give us that. Also in 136.115 and equivalents, the Coast Guard may approve arrangements, fittings, appliance, apparatus, equipment, and do tests to a level of safety equivalent that established by specific provisions of the subchapter. We're looking like we do on anything else, like an air receiver, or when you guys came up with the double wall fuel lines that we needed. Who, besides CARB, can say that this equipment of high temperature that can block our propulsion, can kill our engines, we're putting a safe device in? And I'm going to guess there's maybe 25 manufacturers. There's a couple that are forefront right now, which is Ripos and another one. There's different styles where we're injecting fuel. Other ones are electrical. It seems like we're getting stuck out here and are not going to have support. It's going to be the burdens on us to prove a piece of equipment like this is on us to decide. And I want to see somebody that's regulatory deciding that these things are safe for us to use. And I'll go quiet and let you respond.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate the question. In terms of the first question you asked regarding type approvals. So we don't do type approvals on DPS or any other equipment. In terms of class societies doing that, we have seen some cases with DPFs coming forward where there is a class approval on there. And that's something we'll look at. What we've been saying for DPFs is that we'll essentially look at it a case-by-case basis, depending on the equipment there and what the equipment's actually going on, what vessel it's going on. And so we're going to stick to that in terms of any plan reviews that come forward. We'll go with a case-by-case basis. Now, in terms of a type approval and a blanket approval process, we could allow for that, but we'll have to look on that and whether we can do it or not, because DPS aren't, as you know, aren't specifically regulated anywhere in the federal regs. So it's something that we'll look at. And if we do come up with something kind of a batch approval, that's something that we may look at.
All right, thank you, Mike. I'm going to keep us moving along here. Again, as a reminder, folks, should you have a question, please go into the question icon and type that question in. If you wish to read it out loud, then please raise your hand and I can call on you and unmute you. Otherwise, I will go ahead and read the questions. The next question that we have is, it was noted that OCMI should be consulted regarding new and novel designs before submitting plans to MSC. Traditionally, U.S. Coast Guard engagement begins when an application for inspection is submitted by the builder. In our experience, I apologize, by the way, this came from Michael Completa. In our experience, the planning and development process for new and novel designs typically takes 2 to 3 or more years to develop ahead of the shipyard bid and contracting processes. Slides 15 and 17 indicated that the owner or designer should consult first with the OCMI, who will then refer the project to MSC, and MSC will then refer it to CE&G. At what point in the design process is it appropriate for the owner and designer to engage the OCMI and begin the design basis discussion? Mike?
I recommend reaching out to the OCMI as soon as possible, because the OCMI is kind of going to be the project manager for the either novel vessel design or the repower. They'll be the ones that will be coordinating with MSC. Even if you reached out to MSC and submitted plans, the OCMI is going to be the one that's going to be doing the inspections, final inspections, issuing the COI, et cetera. So I recommend reaching out to them as soon as possible. And then they'll coordinate with MSC and work together to go through that plan review, make sure everything is in place needed for the work that's being done on the vessel, and making sure that you can get the necessary inspections and ultimately the COI issued.
All right, thank you very much. The next question comes from Ramin Ross with two questions. Number one, electrification requirements and safety. How is the U.S. Coast Guard addressing electrification requirements, especially regarding the risks of electrical cable connections in hazardous areas? Any insights for facilities managing this challenge? So we'll pose that one first, and then I'll come to the second one. Mike, you just muted yourself.
Oh, sorry, I muted. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. Electrification requirements and safety. How is the U.S. Coast Guard addressing electrification requirements, especially regarding the risks of electrical cable connections in hazardous areas? Any insights for facilities managing this challenge?
Okay. I prefer to pass this over to MSC. I know they're not on the line. I mean, it's the same process we'll be working on for any of the electrification procedures. And, you know, we'll look at it a case-by-case basis, obviously, but I don't know if I want to pass it over to E&G if you have any insight into this.
Thane, I see you turned your video on and you're unmuted. So did you want to field this one?
Yeah, I can try to take a stab at it. Most of the regulations for hazardous areas are in subchapter J, and generally that's applicable to large vessels, although it really depends on the, you know, what the hazardous area is. For a lot of vessels, like a small passenger vessel or a towing vessel, they really don't have hazardous areas. So you need something, you know, extremely flammable, like a gasoline cargo, or you know, something like a hydrogen pressure vessel would have hazardous areas. Hydrogen piping, liquefied natural gas piping would have hazardous areas. So we probably would defer to subchapter J, which defines the standards for the equipment and the connections, and so that would be the default regulation or requirement would be in the electrical engineering regulations. So hopefully that covers it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me move on to the next question that also came from Ramin Ross. And I want to note that we're starting to get a little tight on time, so there's a few other questions in the queue. I'm going to go to those quickly, and then we'll move on into our break. Second question was about risk assessment for DPF retrofits versus new builds. Has a risk assessment been conducted for vessels undergoing diesel particulate filter DPF retrofits compared to new builds? If so, how are these evaluations different?
It should be the same process for risk assessment. We haven't had a lot of vessels that have actually installed DPFs or retrofitted DPFs that we've seen. There's been a handful of them, but it's gone through the same risk assessment process and evaluation that we've done for either a new build or a retrofit. So it'll go through the same process. And and again, since it's not a specifically regulated piece of equipment, there may be some equivalencies put into place for that piece of equipment on board. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Mike. All right, we're going to move on to the next question from Eric Feely. What about the timeline for these processes? What are the ranges of the time it could take for all these steps? Also, are there any costs to the vessel owner for U.S. Coast Guard involvement?
Typically for plan review, that's going through the MSC, they typically have a 30-day period to get back to the submitter, the owner operator. It may take a couple months in order to go through the process, depending on what's involved, especially if the vessel's in the yard, and we have to go out and do the normal inspection process on that. But that's typically the timeline right now for at least plan review is 30 days. And in terms of costs involved, there are fees involved for annual inspections of vessels. Those are listed in the CFR, I believe CFR or 46 CFR 2.1, I believe it is. Kind of list, depending on vessel type, there are inspection fees involved. That's a yearly fee. And it typically covers any maintenance or anything that an inspector has to go out for. So it's kind of a one-time fee per year. But that's all we have in place right now.
All right, thank you. We have one more question, and then I'm going to go ahead and close this session out and move on to a break. This is from Chris Flagg. The National Fire Protection Association recently adopted NFPA 110 with an effective date of May 8th, 2024. This added a new paragraph 5.6.5.5.1. Where used for permanent level 1 applications, EPA mandated inducement engine shutdowns due to emission systems control that are required on Tier 4 certified engines with SCR shall be prohibited. How does this affect new builds? I can reread that if you need me to.
Thanks for your question. I'm not familiar with that part of NFPA. I'll have to look at it and see how it affects any equipments, in particular DPS, how it involves them. And I have to get back to you if that's okay. But I don't have anything offhand unless anybody from ENG or MSC does.
All right, so the question came from, again, Chris Flagg. Mike, are you familiar with Chris Flagg? Or if not,
not offhand, no, but
okay, we'll make sure
I can get his information and get back to him.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we'll get the contact info. Chris, perhaps you can provide your contact info, or likewise we'll provide Mike's, and then we can go from there. Thane, did you want to weigh in on something there before we moved on?
Just real quick. I mean, we need to look at that, but I think in general, what the question seemed to say, or it was a statement that the NFPA standard would prohibit shutdown based on a emissions failure. And I think that sounds like something that we'd have to, there's no Coast Guard regulation similar to that, but we would not expect that let's say a DPF failure would shut down the engine or the vessel. That's kind of a big issue, and it's maybe something we need to talk with the EPA about. I don't know whether that's, it may be something we look at what they've done with the trucking industry. I know DPFs have been mandated there for a long time, I believe. So anyway, we need to look at the NFPA standard and exactly what it says, and perhaps the EPA regulation also. But Thank you.
All right, very good. Mike, do you remember off the top of your head, do you have contact info on the first slide, on your first slide?
I do not, but I can
Okay.
provide that separately.
Well, if you're comfortable with me providing your email address, then when we come back from break, I'll go ahead and do that globally for everybody.
Sounds good.
Awesome, great. Okay, we are going to move on to a 5-minute break at this point in time. What I'm going to do before we do that is I'm going to launch a poll, and so let me go ahead and open that up. Something wrong with the poll here. Relaunch poll. There we go. Okay, so you should at this point in time have a poll that's titled TWG Workshop 3, Getting to Know You. This is just, as I noted earlier, a demographics question. We're going to go to a 5-minute break. I have 2:02 on my timepiece right now, so we will reconvene at 2:07. We'll keep the poll open for a little while, even after the break, but please feel free to start responding to it, and we'll share results with you all a little bit thereafter. So at this point in time, we're going to go to a break, and we will reconvene in 5 minutes. And Zhang Li, if you could move back to the break slide so people know that that's where we're at. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. At this time, hopefully everybody had a fruitful, albeit very quick, break, 5-minute break. Zhen Li, if you could please advance us to the next slide. Thank you. So at this time, a couple things really quickly, logistically. I know that we had a hand to go up right as we went to our break from JJ Nesmith. So I'll come to that in a minute. Presuming it was with relationship to the Coast Guard presentation. A couple things that I want to cover, though, very quickly. As noted, I want to give Mike Boy's contact info out. So if folks have a pen and paper ready, Mike can be reached at michael.j.boyes, B-O-Y-E-S, at USCG, like US Coast Guard, .mil, M-I-L. So michael.j.boyes at USCG.mil, M-I-L. In a minute, we're going to go to our next panel. I have left the poll open as I noted I would, so I'm going to keep that open, and I'll come back to that in between this panel and then the third panel. At this time, JJ, I've gone ahead and allowed you to unmute yourself. So if you had a question to pose to Coast Guard, please do so at this time. Otherwise, I'm going to move us along. And again, JJ, you will need to unmute yourself. I've just allowed you the opportunity to do that. Okay, not hearing anything. Then I'm going to go ahead and move us along. And if JJ comes back, JJ, please go ahead and repose your question or write it in, and we'll come to it. At this time, I would like to hand things over to our first panel. Our moderator will be Nick Taylor, who is Air Pollution Specialist, Marine and Freight Enforcement Division of CARB. And we have 4 panelists, Corey Souse, Sean Bennett, Captain Alex Brody, and then Thomas McLean. So at this point in time, Nick, I'll look to you to introduce anything. Then we're going to look to have our panelists give brief introductions of themselves, and then we'll move on to the questions that you've got prepared for them.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Dave. Hello, my name is Nick Taylor, and yeah, I'm an air pollution specialist in the Marine and Freight Enforcement section, which means I'm an inspector for many of CARB's regulations, including the Commercial Harborcraft Rule. This first panel discussion today on implementation is intended to provide an overview of the experiences and strategies that equipment operators are using to comply with the amended CHC regulation. We're pleased to have some folks from one facility and 3 vessel operations participating in the panel today. So I'm going to call on each of our panelists to introduce themselves in a moment. And after introductions, I'll be reading out some questions I've been given for our panelists to respond to. After those are discussed, I'll be directing questions from the audience until about 3:15, which is when we're going to transition to our second panel. So I'll begin with Corey Sauce. Corey, would you please introduce yourself and describe your company affiliation, outline your background and experience here?
Can you hear me?
And Corey, you may be muted, so panelists at this time would probably be optimal for all of you to unmute yourselves and turn on your videos.
Can you hear me now? I
Looks
should
like
be
we can't
unmuted.
hear you, Corey.
Corey, you are unmuted. Are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Uh-oh, we are not hearing Corey. Why don't we move on and then let's try to problem solve?
Okay, it sounds like you might
Oh,
be in the
okay.
Spanish channel, Corey.
Yes, she is. She's in the channel. So, Corey, you're going to need to ensure that you've clicked on mute original audio in the interpretation section. So we'll work with you offline to try to get that done. Go ahead, please. Nick, why don't we move on to our other panels?
Sure. Our next panelist is Dr. Tom McLean. Tom, you want to go ahead?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this. I'm happy to participate today. I work for the Port of San Diego, where we're trying to electrify everything and clean up the water, what runs on the water and what's running off the water, moving freight around. I've been with the port for 6 years. Prior to that, I was 20 years with a utility in the Northwest. So that's my background, renewables and electrical interconnection things. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks, Thomas. And let's see, I guess, is your audio working now, Corey? I'll try again.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sending her a chat.
Okay, gotcha. I'll just move ahead then. In the meantime, our next panelist is Captain Alex Brody.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me participate. I have been operating boats.
Oh, I don't seem to be able to hear you, Alex. Are you in the English channel as well?
Check. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, my name is Alex Brody. I've been a boat operator now for about 35 years. I'm the managing partner of Island Packers. We have 4 small passenger ferries that we run out to the Channel Islands National Park.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And our 4th panelist is Sean Bennett. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I hope you guys can all hear me. I did that right? Okay, good. Yeah, Sean Bennett with the Bait Elsa Maritime. We are a tanker escort and assist company that runs both in LA Long Beach as well as San Francisco Bay, and been in operations for more than 50 plus years. Small company, have about 50 people, and our focus is really on the Oil Spill Prevention Act of 1990. Our equipment is built specifically to help tankers in and out safely. So it's really about, for us, it's oil spill prevention as we tether to those tankers. And so our job requires obviously very powerful tugboats to be able to stop and redirect some of the large vessels that are coming in and out. Our boats run 24/7, 365. 4 people live on them, and they're in operation pretty much all day long.
Gotcha.
Hey, Nick,
All right,
can you hear me
go
yet?
ahead, Corey. Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Hey.
Oh, hallelujah.
Go right ahead.
I'm technologically challenged. I apologize for that. I am Corey Sauce, Vice President of HSQE at Sauce Brothers, and we are family owned and operated, headquartered in Coos Bay, Oregon. And we're an ocean towing company that primarily carries forest products, building materials, and petroleum along the U.S. West Coast and Hawaii.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you everybody for joining us, and glad that we're working for audio. Thank you. So
And Nick, if
go
I may,
ahead.
if I may just also thank, there were a couple people who were communicating to us via Q&A to let us know that they could hear Corey. So Jacqueline and Maritza, thank you very much for trying to assist. That was very helpful. Appreciate it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, we really appreciate everyone's help with this. So yeah, I guess I'll now be reading out some starting questions to each of our panelists here. And for our panelists, you're welcome to chime in after someone has answered a question if you want to add something. So first questions for Corey Sauce. So Corey, what are the steps that Sauce Bros Ocean Towing has taken to evaluate Tier 4 repower and DPF installation feasibility in your existing fleet of line towing tugboats? What has Sauce Brothers learned, or Bros learned?
Our engineers have been working for a long time on a detailed engineering of Tier 4 designs and understand really very well the challenges of creating an effective, reliable, and safe Tier 4 design. They've completed extensive research and testing with DEF to determine the best storage methods and materials. They've conducted many interviews with other operators, designers, and vendors, as well as surveys of existing Tier 4 vessels in service. And also, we are currently working with ABS on a Tier 4 repower feasibility study. As far as what we've learned, well, this is where it gets complicated, and I feel like I'm about ready to be the skunk at the garden party. We've learned that there are lots of challenges. Due to the danger to the crew on the open ocean and the danger to the environment of the cargo we carry, reducing emissions must not come at a cost of making the vessel less reliable, less capable, or less safe. Regarding applicability of regulations and or feasibility, the Sauce Brothers ocean-going tug we're a small tug, specifically designed for long-range at-sea operation in the open ocean, and we have to do this with a very high degree of safety and reliability. This should place it in a subcategory unique from other hovercraft designs. We believe firmly that every vessel type should be evaluated based on its unique operating requirements. We've learned that we've got space issues, and they're complicated. Sauce Brothers vessels have to remain under the 500-ton ITC limit for its interior volume in order to remain economically viable. Fitting the SCRs and DPFs and all of the pipe and fittings of the exhaust system would require a completely new above-deck structure, which does not make any economic sense for a repower project. There must be sufficient space around the SCRs and DPFs for the removal and replacement of the catalyst elements and servicing. The SCRs must also be located in such a place that they can be serviced safely. The SCRs and DPFs must have sufficient space around them for good airflow. Generous airflow past the SCRs and DPFs is necessary to remove the heat loads from the engine rooms. The DPF and SCR equipment must be plumbed in series with large diameter fittings and thermal expansion joints, which take up considerable additional space, and we just don't have it available. The real estate just isn't there. There's also an issue with noise. In the case of the long-haul towing vessel, it has been found that dealing with low-frequency noise vibration is important to combat crew fatigue on long voyages. This is a factor affecting crew retention and safety. There's no data that shows that the SCR DPF can deal with these frequencies, so Sauce Brothers is reluctant to forego mufflers, which is yet another component that has to be plumbed in series with the SCR and DPF. We've got temperature issues. Both the SCR and DPF add large heat loads to the engine room. DPFs, I think Jerry might have mentioned this earlier, DPFs run very hot, typically a minimum of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit during the regen process. For the 500 ITC ocean-going tugboat, the small volume of the stack compared to the volume of the equipment will require extra forced air ventilation. An engine room that is hot and stuffy and barely tolerable is still a safety issue. An engine room that is uncomfortable to work in will tend to not receive adequate supervision or maintenance. This affects our ability to retain good crew as well as vessel safety. I'm going to start to sound like a broken record here. We've got urea tank issues. The ocean-going tug embarking on a long-range voyage do so far from fuel and urea replenishment facilities. Our tugs typically carry around 130,000 gallons of fuel. At a projected burn rate of 5%, this is going to mean that we've got to have a urea tank of approximately 6,000 gallons. Considering the relatively small size of our vessels, this is a major structural modification, which requires rearranging a significant portion of the auxiliary equipment in our engine rooms. Also, built-in tanks have to have voids to separate them from the diesel tanks, which would lead to a loss of fuel capacity definitely more than 6,000 gallons. In summation, what we've learned about DPFs is they're very large for the small volume of our vessels, especially considering that we absolutely have to remain under 500 tons ITC. DPFs are power-hungry beasts and may require an additional generator in order to maintain power redundancy, which we just don't have the space for. DPFs could be a fire hazard, which is a concern. And finally, we're concerned that excessive soot buildup could create a risk of catastrophic engine shutdown. We move large quantities of petroleum products, and total failures or even partial failures of this equipment could cause a catastrophic environmental event. So that's all I got from my end.
Okay, well, thanks for taking that question there, Corey. I'll move along to our next question then, which is for Tom McLean. How important is collaboration and coordination amongst CHC vessel and facility operators in providing and using shore power for CHC regulation compliance? And what strategies can be implemented to facilitate better collaboration?
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for the question. So for those who didn't notice here, we've pivoted from Tier 4 over to shore power, which is one of the new orders. Particularly important is the 15-minute order for that. The question was about the relationship between boat owners and the dock operators, but you need to recognize that there's more parties involved than just those two. So you've also got the Port Authority, you've got your electric utility, you've got all your permitting agencies, and who knows who they're going to be, plus all the companies that are going to design and permit and construct all of this. So you can see with all those, there's a lot of parties there. So there's a lot of combinations of who's communicating with whom to get this taken care of. So our primary role at the port is to make sure everybody knows what the new rules are and who's going to be responsible for what. So if typically it's like if the boat is ready for shore power, then the dock needs to be ready for shore power. Otherwise, the dock will be penalized. If the dock's ready and the boat's not, then the boat gets penalized. So making sure everybody knows. And we've got a number of media for outreach with that. We have a quarterly maritime stakeholder forum, and this includes anybody with business on the bay. It includes our big shipbuilders, but it's also the Harborcraft, the tugboat companies. It includes the commercial fishermen as well as the sport fishers as well. We do individual outreach when we think that they're just people who are not really paying attention, and we need to make sure that they're up to date with what's going to happen. And then there's organizations we can work with. There's trade organizations, obviously. One for the fishermen, one for the sport fishers, another one for boat shipbuilders or whatever, and then the marina owners and operators, because they are really quite often the ones who are going to be key to moving forward with this. And the Port of San Diego really is a landlord, so most of our marinas are on long-term leases, and some of these leaseholders have been there way before, decades and decades before the port was even in existence in 1960. So they've been around in it, and they, making sure they know what to do. A few places we actually own. So we've got a Saturday morning fresh fish dockside fish market is what I'm trying to say there, and we have to put in the shore power for that, for those boats that are coming in there and selling their fish off the boat. And then some of these are really savvy. We'll talk to somebody and they say, oh yeah, we've been up in Sacramento the last 2 months talking to CARB. So they already know everything to do. To improve, the most important thing is making sure everybody needs to know who needs to be involved. It's easy to say everybody needs to have, they go, well, we already have shore power. Most marinas do have shore power, but is it going to be enough? And so a typical fishing vessel may have not commercial, but a sport fishing vessel. They have shore power there. It's maybe 20 amps or so, which is enough to run a fan, a lights, that sort of things. But when they get in the morning and now they've got pumps and kitchens and everything to take care of like that, then they're running their diesels. And then so now with the rules, when they come in from the morning trip and the afternoon trip, now they've got to plug in, and that 20 amp service is not going to be enough. So keeping them informed about what needs to be done, and just really facilitating anyway, because we're just trying to help everybody get through these rules and move forward. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. I'll then move on to our third question, which is for Captain Brody. So, Alex Brody, what are the steps that Island Packers would recommend when evaluating a fleet for Tier 4 marine repowers? And what have Island Packers learned from going through this process?
Hi, thanks. I didn't catch all. I don't know if it's on my end or your end, but I didn't catch all of the question, but I think I know. I got a preview. So anyway, yeah, it has been a process. Passenger vessel operators are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. We have, on one hand, we have pending, regulations that are requiring us to use technology that is, honestly, it's not really proven, and some of it doesn't even exist. And then on the other hand, we have other regulatory bodies in the Coast Guard, which we're great partners with them, and they're our number one fan when it comes to safety. We work hand in hand with Coast Guard, but a lot of times their regulations are behind the times, so it can be hard to get this technology moving forward. So in regards to a Tier 4, for us, we have not been able to find anything that will work on our vessels. Our vessels are just too small. We just don't have the space for the SCR, the extra DEF tanks, and all the associated equipment. They need compressors. We don't carry compressors. And for the DPF, it doesn't. It requires so much power. For instance, the smallest DPF that we could find required 15 kW, which might not be much for a big vessel, but our boats only carry 12 kW generator, so it's barely enough to keep the beer cold. So for us to use we'd have to put in a new generator just to run the DPFs, and then that generator will have to have a DPF, and it's kind of a crazy rabbit hole. So that's been a real challenge. Finding engines that will fit in our space, because there's very few EPA Tier 4 engines under 600 kilowatts. It's been a real challenge. The other thing is time frame. So for us to order engines right now are about 20 months out for us to get a new engine. And when you involve all the different the planning, the naval architecture, you're looking at several years before you can get one of these things online. So, and I know that CARB has been good about giving extensions, but it's just, again, we're just going to be continuing to have to ask for extensions for things that we may or may not be able to use. So it's been challenging, to say the least. The financial issues have been a big problem for us too. There is some money out there for replacing older engines with higher tier engines, but with our boats and many other operators as well, we have been updating our equipment on a regular basis. We want to have modern, clean engines for our customers. We also wanted them to be efficient, so we keep improving as a new engine becomes available. We've been replacing them. Well, that has in turn been a penalty for us, because if we go to, say, the VW funds and ask for a grant, they're only giving monies to companies or operators that have older tier 1, tier 2 engines, which is fine. They should get rid of those engines for sure, but that leaves us out. For instance, we did a study to replace this boat that's right behind me here in this image, replace the engines on that boat, and it was going to add 25% more weight to the value of the, to the overall weight of the vessel, which for us, that means we lose passenger space. So we were going to lose 25% of our passengers. And that is a huge financial burden. For boat operators, you don't make any money for the first 50% of your cargo. That's just to pay for your fixed costs, your overhead. And then after that, it's a small percentage until you get to the very last. In our case, our cargo is passengers. And maybe your last few customers are the ones that are actually helping the company to survive, to make a profit. And so by taking away that 25% of our passengers, we would lose all profit. We become a nonprofit company, which is, why bother? We unfortunately can't raise our rates. Our rates, and most passenger operators in California are work under the PUC or in our case, under a concession contract with the Channel Islands National Park. So we can't change our rates. So yeah, it's boy, I guess, what is my advice for people who are trying to upgrade to tier 4? I honestly, I couldn't tell you. It's been very, very frustrating for us. I've spent lots and lots of man hours trying to interpret the regulations, trying to find solutions, and it's just become a very, very expensive and time-consuming process that unfortunately seems to be really frustrating.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for answering the question there, Captain Brody. I'll be moving along to our next panelist for a fourth question.
And Nick, hey, this is Dave. If you could maybe speak up a little bit louder, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that. I can certainly speak up. Yeah, so thanks for that feedback, Captain Brody. Next, I'll be asking Sean Bennett a question as well. So for you, Sean, how has Bay Delta utilized the available extensions in the CHC regulation to maintain CHC regulatory compliance while undergoing Tier 4 repower projects? And what does Bay Delta recommend for other operators? What issues have arisen in Bay Delta's repower process requiring scheduling extensions?
Yeah, I mean, I think thanks for having us, and appreciate you including me. And the question. So, I mean, for us, it's certainly been a long process. We've done, larger vessels, so we do have a little more engine room space than some of the smaller harbor tugs for some of the smaller ports. So we do have the space for SCRs and Tier 4 repower capabilities with our vessels. Kind of just lucky because we built larger vessels, again, for tanker escort requirements. And so they just have that space. But still, the challenges, come in this form of what you've heard, which is really long lead times for equipment, yard capacity, and then working within the regulatory requirements for all the grants that we've had to go out for. I mean, so really, we've needed more time and more money to make this happen. And we very much have used the extensions to the fullest, ability we could. And we've used, one of the things we looked at very carefully was just how do we sequence the fleet, right? Because for us, taking a vessel out of a 5 or 6 boat fleet, I mean, there's only typically 15 tugboats that do what we do in the port of LA Long Beach, let's say, right? So we chart that pretty carefully. And at one point, the fleets got down collectively as low as like 11 tugboats. So what does that mean? That means ship delays and, and customer dissatisfaction and supply chain quagmires. And I promise you that creates more emissions than, pulling out 2 tugboats and try to get them repowered sooner, right? Just because ships go to anchorage, tons of extra vessel movements, including, tugboat movements and that kind of stuff. So, we were pretty pleased to see one of the aspects of the extensions that doesn't require you to, if you have 2 tugs that are required to repower in one particular calendar year, then you get an extension to push out one of the vessels to the next year. And so that's something I would definitely recommend that operators look at carefully. And that's been a huge help to us because it sort of had a waterfalling effect on the fleet, buying us a little more time. But trying to thread the needle of signing the Carl Moyer contract to get some of the fundings. These are, the cost of repowering one of our tugs is half the value of what it costs us to build it. So, it's 50% of the total cost of the original build just to put these new engines in. So we can't do it as a small company without funding. And so the signing of a Carl Moyer contract precludes you from, ordering equipment. And if you order equipment after you've signed the Carl Moyer contract, it's a good chance it's not going to get there in time to complete the project for the rules. So, these waterfalling extensions that we were able to get has helped us enormously in that way. And so, yeah, you can imagine we've got this sort of mother of all spreadsheets to figure out how to get all these engines. It's not just one engine per vessel either, right? There's generators and the mains. And so it's been a huge challenge. We've, literally hired an additional person just to help with it. And on top of that, we've hired a consultant to help try to unweave the regulatory complexities. But I think, on the path for all of us here to clean up the air and be, get to zero as soon as we can. I think we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the cause and effect of some of these regulations set us back, 2 steps backwards sometimes before we get to go forward because the cause and effect can cause congestion. It can cause, where we're bringing our fuel in, the R99 that we have to use, there's a lot of transportation involved with that. And some of the shoreside power regulations too, we have to look at very carefully because, we escort ships for 11 hours upriver and, we'll have to bring the tug back to, say, San Francisco to plug in only to head back up for another 5 hours to, sail the ship the next day. So, I think that it's been, in some ways a great process in terms of just, working with the CARB staff. We've had a lot of great relationships. I think they've got some pretty clear and understanding folks over there that understand exactly what we're going through and have helped with these extensions and has helped along the way. So we appreciate all that help for sure. But I'd be lying if I said it's been easy.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks for the comments there as well, Sean. So I'm now going to start directing questions for the panel from our audience. So if folks have a question, they can click the Q&A button to type your question in, or you can click raised hand to be called upon. And of course, if any of our panelists have any additional comments or questions for each other as well, folks are welcome to chime in too.
Nick, this is Dave. There was a prior question from TJ Tarabulski that actually had come in just prior to the panel starting. So we can go ahead and start with that. I don't think it necessarily goes to the panel, but it might or it might actually go to still our Coast Guard representatives. So if you want to go through that one first, or I can read it either way.
Sure. Yeah. Can you read the question?
Sure. So let me first check in. Mike, Boyes, are you here still?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, great. So let me pose the question and then we'll confirm if you think it should be going to you all. NFPA inducement section is relative to US EPA stationary engine emissions regulations. The inducement requirement for stationary engines is not applied to marine engines. It's really more of a statement in reality, but does anybody want to speak to it? Or Mike, did you want to speak to anything about it? Otherwise, we can move on.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the EPA inducement engine shutdown standards. So it's something I'd have to look at.
All right. Okay.
To get back to the person offline again.
That's very good. So then, Nick, I'll hand it back over to you. We've got this first question from Ramin Ross. Or actually, there's two questions. So.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a two-part question in our Q&A. So I'll read the first one and then we'll go from there. So this is from Ramin Ross. Hello. I represent those involved in the transportation of petroleum and petroleum products. Two questions, and I'll just ask the first one first. Shore power readiness. Can the panel please provide any insights on the uptake of shore power readiness for vessels, including petrochemical tank barges and tugs operating in hazardous areas, and insights from vessel reporting requirements? What are you guys seeing? So I think this might be a better question for perhaps Corey or Sean, but it's open to the whole panel for comment.
I'm going to see if Jerry can help me out on this one. He agreed to help me out since he's an engineer and I am most definitely not. Jerry, you want to take this one for me? I think Jerry's out there.
I'm here. I can tell you that in asking the local ports, without compromising myself too much, that typically have us on a month-to-month lease and then requiring them to bring in what takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to get shore power to our docks is a very tough problem. You know, it's the infrastructure for us, and Sean could probably speak on this also, is not really good. And this regulation is going to be difficult with our landlords, which are typically the ports. Very little private property there, but what we're seeing is we're not getting supported in getting good shore power unless you're established. Like we have one port in LA Long Beach area we've been at for a number of years, and we do have good shore power, but we do have other areas we tie up our sister companies that have no shore power, and I don't foresee them getting it. So I believe Sauce Brothers, at least in one port, they're okay. They've got good shore power in one of the ports in LA and Long Beach, but everywhere else you work, you have no shore power. Any of the terminals, you don't have shore power, I don't believe.
No, we're good. We're good in Richmond and we're good in LA Long Beach. But yes, you're correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and for me, I think, you know, same issue, right? So we have it here at our home dock in San Francisco. Been here for 50 years, roughly. You know, moved over one pier, but had some construction done. But you know, down in LA Long Beach, there's one power cord to be shared for 6 tugs, with no indication that that's going to be, you know, fully upgraded anytime soon. And then, like I was saying in my initial comments, you know, we run vessels up to Benicia, and there is a dock up there. We squat at, let's call it, and pay to squat, you know, pay for, but on a per visit basis. Yeah, I mean, I think that the notion that they're going to invest in that dock is probably far-fetched. We're not worth it to them, right? They would just tell us no longer to dock there. The problem again with that is we're bringing tankers up there all the time, and so what do? If we have to come back to a facility that has plug-in capabilities, we run all the way back downriver, another 30 miles to plug in for the evening, only to run back up to sail the ship the next day, let's say. And that just is completely counterproductive on what the goals are here. So yeah, and there was a symposium down on the Port of Long Beach, and it was, you know, trying to work on get to zero quicker. And so, but one of the things I brought up was, yeah, let's let's just start with some of the smaller stuff, like giving us shore power, and get moving from there. And then maybe we can move to the next level. But it's certainly a challenge for the harbor tugs, and the barges that are coming in and the ships that are coming in. I guess also little different challenges, but essentially the same problem. But they've got so many different types of plugs to try to match up from ships coming from all over the world, right? And then the amount of power requirements for some of the pumps that they use to offload their cargo is immense. And so it's just not, the infrastructure is not there. The power may be there, but the delivery system certainly isn't.
Gotcha. And this is a two-part question, but I saw Jerry and Alex, both your hands go up. So if you're responding to this as well, go right ahead. How about we start with you, Jerry?
My question's not related. I want to make a statement after you finish the shore power question.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Alex, do you have a question, or are you responding to this point as well?
No, I'll respond to the question. Even though we're not in the petrochemical business, we are looking into using some type of a hybrid system going forward with some, battery for at least part of our power. Our routes are pretty far, up to 100 miles. So to carry batteries, it doesn't make any sense for that. However, if we could do for a partial hybrid system, that would be great. The problem is the area that we're going to is a wilderness area. It's there's no infrastructure whatsoever. So we would have to have enough battery power, even if we wanted just 30%, which is I believe the CARB minimum for a hybrid, 30% of our power. We not using our current vessels couldn't carry that much weight. So yeah, infrastructure is huge. We do have it at our harbor, but not on the other end. So just basically concurring with Jerry and Sean.
Gotcha. And Thomas, were you going to chime into this as well?
Yeah, definitely. Because we've got a lot of shore power going on at the Port of San Diego. Obviously, up and down the coast, at least through California, I know in Seattle, there's already shore power for all the big ships. They're, freighters, and as well as the cruise boats. But that's big power, that's expensive, and it costs as much to power up, put in a shore power for a small boat as it does for a big ship. There's so many pieces there. And the additional load is an issue, and working with the utility about that is we have regular meetings with them just to talk about all the load. And if it's not one thing, if it's not shore power, it's another hotel or something that's going on. I think everybody on the West Coast is just seeing growth. In San Diego, we do have the Crowley E-Wolf, which is the first all-electric tug, but we have a nice little it's the right tool for the right job. And if you're in San Francisco Bay taking something from from the Golden Gate to Benicia, or one of the tugs in the Seattle area, Seattle Tacoma, that's a very different thing, and I don't think that's really reasonable to expect that to be battery powered. The E-Wolf uses about 10 to 15% of its battery power just on one job, and it'll do 4 jobs in a day and then charge overnight. So it's fine, but we have a nice, easy situation for them, and looking at other places. So having a universal rule doesn't always work, especially now with this electrification. And I just said it, finding the right tool for the job is really important. And with Harborcraft right now, there are so many different technologies. Fuel options right now happening that are in the works that a lot of the big shipbuilders would say, if I'm building a new ship, it's going to be dual fuel, because I don't know what the future holds. So we're just looking at different alternatives. So.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
I'll ask the second part of this question, and then Jerry, I'll get to you. But the second part of this question is shore power infrastructure Can the panel please provide any insights on the uptake of shore power infrastructure installations across California and at marine oil terminal facilities, along with insights from facility reporting requirements? What are you guys seeing? So I don't know if this is something that maybe Tom, you might be able to speak to a little bit, because I know your port has some familiarity with the reporting process, but it's open to the whole panel.
Yeah, so he was sort of specific though about fuel moving, correct?
Yeah, shore power infrastructure installations across California and at marine oil terminal facilities.
Yeah, so we don't have much of that, obviously. We don't have any refineries in San Diego. We're not an energy port. We're just a freight and tourist port. So that part's not relevant. But yeah, I mean the tugboats. I mean, we've got the one, but everyone else is looking. The ferry's we're gonna get 2 new ferries that are gonna be electric. So again, we have these short runs, and the uptake is there. Everybody's interested. Is just trying to find, how does this work for me? And and there's still just a lot of variety. I'll leave it at that.
I can handle some of that too, if you'd like. We work pretty closely with the Clean Air Barge folks, right? That are one of the solutions to the lack of plug-in power, and they're building. They have an enormous amount of demand for their pieces of equipment, and that's, as you guys know, on the carb side, expanding to tankers, and so they're having to construct quite a few transitional technology barges that are going to, and the idea is that they're going to be required for the next 20 years. So that's what their insight is on how long it's going to take to get shore power capabilities up to speed. So that, I don't have a lot of direct experience with that, but in terms of our work with them, we just towed a new clean air barge down to the Port of LA from Portland. And so, yeah, we kind of see that from the demand side and the supply side of those barges, that the tankers and the oil facilities, aren't expecting to have a solution, a plug-in solution for quite some time. And there's a lot of investment, banking on that, essentially, put it that way.
Sean, can I ask a question for clarification? What would be the load for a tanker with all those pumps? I know pumps are huge energy hogs, but
huge. And I might lean on Jerry or Fred, who I think is on, are both engineers. But I know I've heard numbers that are considerably more than like a cruise ship, because of all the pumps.
Yeah, I'm going to say we're in there a couple of megawatts, probably. I mean, depending upon what they're doing at the time, if they're ballasting and pumping, and there's a lot there. And, to kind of follow on with Sean, we've had quite a few follow-up meetings talking about electric tugs. Obviously we built one way back, the first one, Sean. And the one thing that was interesting in talking to Edison, not San Diego Gas and Electric, they said, everybody wants to do this, but do you guys realize how far a tug support system is on the pecking order when we're trying to put charging stations for 50 trucks in right here, nearby you guys, and shore power for the ships? They said our grid isn't prepared to handle even partially charging all the trucks and the cranes, and you guys are way down there. So that's
here, let me interrupt here just to clarify that the commercial harbor craft regulation shore power requirement is limited to auxiliary engines that have an engine power rating up to 99 kilowatts, and so we're not requiring full electrification of the product pumps on petrochemical tank barges, which would require maybe 2 to 4 megawatts. We're looking at auxiliary engines with a power rating of 99 kilowatts or under.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. The conversation sort of drifted from hovercraft to ocean-going vessels.
You brought up the Crowley electric tug, and I'm going that's it's a potential for all of us. It's a good thing. We all agree that hybrid's coming. But anyway, yeah, I understand the 99 kW rule very well, Andrew. Thank you.
If I could jump in here real quick.
Jerry, your hand was up next, but I don't know if you were chiming in or did you have a separate question?
Well, I did just want to, kind of in support of Corey and Sauce Brothers, and I know they're working on a design, and we're presently building 4 tugs down at Eastern for Southern California and Northern California. And with this DPF issue, just to reinforce the challenges they're looking at and what they've learned is also what we've learned, there's no DPFs available. We're also building a barge that has 500 kW generators, 2 of them up at Gunderson, Oregon, for vapor recovery systems for the tankers in El Segundo. Also, no DPFs available. Well, design goes out, I think Corey said, it goes out 5 years ahead of time. We're actually been working on these projects for about 3 years. We cannot design for DPFs. I mean, we have filed letters and we're waiting for responses, but at this time, you know, there is no DPFs available for large engines. And the suppliers, the two that, you know, that CARB specifically talks about is NET and Ripos. I don't know that they can tell us when. I mean, we heard August once for some of the smaller ones, but, you know, I would like to kind of ask the people on the airboard side of this, do you guys foresee a CARB-approved DPF for larger Category 1 engines in the near future? And what size is it going to be? And how are we going to design for that when we're already cutting steel for this equipment? In fact, our barge is almost built, and we can't figure it out. So
Sure, yeah. Well, I see that Andrew came on. Andrew, are you going to answer Jerry here?
Yeah, I wanted to provide a little bit of input on that topic. So in regards to your question for Coast Guard earlier, Jerry, so like Coast Guard indicated, you know, they're not type classifying, they're not certifying engines or DPFs. And so it's the engine OEMs that certify the engines with US EPA, and it's the Type Classification Society that's going to type approve the engine. However, CARB does have the CARB verification procedure, which is applicable to the DPFs. And so CARB is not requiring any DPFs to be installed that are not either CARB verified or are not OEM certified by US EPA. And so the CARB verification procedure also includes a fairly robust durability demonstration requirement, and it also includes a pre-installation compatibility assessment prior to any installation on an in-use vessel in a retrofit type application. In addition to that, the CARB verified level 3 DPFs would be verified only to specific engine families that they have been determined to have compatibility with. So there's not going to be any concern about mismatching. With that said, I wanted to give Zach Zink a chance to speak because he's had his hand up for a very long time. Thank you, Zach, for your patience.
Not a problem. Can you guys hear me?
Sure. We can go to Zachariah, and then we'll go back to some questions from the chat here.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Oh, wait, Zachariah, I think you might have the interpretation issue. Can you confirm that you're in the English channel and that you've muted the original audio?
I did that.
It's the interpretation button on the bottom.
And while he's doing that, this is Dave, the facilitator. Just a general reminder to everybody in the meeting, if you haven't already done so, please go back and check in your interpretation icon that in addition to having selected the language channel, of which at this point in time, I think everybody is in English, please be sure that you've checked the mute original audio. Otherwise, we will not be able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, sir.
I did do it. I did it twice. I don't know why it went back, but if we could circle back to the infrastructure of the shore power, I can speak specifically for like the eWolf. The cost of charging that vessel during certain high usage hours in the Port of San Diego is extremely high for the eWolf. And speaking for the infrastructure of shore power in the Bay Area, where 2 of my boats, we work with Sean and Fred there from Bay Delta very closely. You know, the only place to plug in our boats is at our home dock at Pier 17. I mean, if we go upriver, like Sean said, to Benicia Industrial Dock, there's no plugs. There's hardly anywhere to tie up the boats these days, you know, let alone plug into shore power. So, I mean, we'd be more than willing to plug our boats in and shut everything down. I mean, that's preferable for us. No one likes to listen to a generator while they're trying to sleep, you know. I mean, but the infrastructure is just not there. It's not. we're almost done with our charging station in San Diego, and hopefully that'll be up to full speed here pretty quick for the eWolf. But even when that's working correctly and online, charging that fully electric tugboat takes quite a bit of time. And if you're doing it at full capacity when everybody else is using energy, not at nighttime, the rates are very expensive. So we do have to plan around those kinds of issues.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Zechariah. Next, I'm going to take a question here from our Q&A thread. This is from Ann McIntyre. Do all panelists feel the existing extension process allows for effective business planning, operational and financial? And I think that's open to everyone.
I can dive in there.
Sure, go ahead, Alex.
Thanks. Great question, Ann. And I've heard it several times throughout the day. When we're planning a project, like a fleet expansion project, it's years out, and especially with the lag on equipment has really been tough. I've seen boats that were 90% done, and then they're just sitting there waiting for their engines to be installed in the yard. So yeah, so the extensions, it's kind of a, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a rabbit hole when you have to keep trying to do these extensions. And then there's different, you can get some credit for if you electrify one vessel, and then that changes things. It's kind of an accounting nightmare, but yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
And then,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Go ahead.
for me, I mean, I think for us, it's same. It's definitely a business planning challenge. I look at it a few different ways. I think there's the regulations in general are going to cause, pain and suffering for companies, no question, right? So there's acceptable, meaning we're happy to contribute. We're happy to, recognize that there's going to be some rough patches as we transition, from an energy standpoint. We'll try to do our part and accept those challenges and really, try to take them head on. I think for us, as a small private company without a bunch of investors to answer to, it's not that hard. We just are not sure where we're going all the time in terms of business. And it's probably, I'd put it in the category of one of those, all right, we'll take that one. The other category of maybe the difficulties is a little more challenging, meaning we're not going to get there, right? There's just some rules that are in place that I don't think we're going to get to without extensions. So absolutely critical to have those to get, because the technology is not there. But then there's some challenges I would put in the category of unproductive. And I think the charging facility issue is something that we need to get around the table and talk together and say, some of these challenges that the regulation are presenting are actually going to make us go backwards, and we need some infrastructure help. And we need CARBs and maybe the Coast Guards, but certainly the ports assistance to say, hey, how do we collectively actually clean up the air together, rather than have an unwanted cause of the regulation, and just make sure that we don't go a place we don't want to go. Right. So that's my answer from a sort of planning standpoint.
Sauce Brothers, from our perspective, the issue has been more with ordering the engines and the lead time to get the product and the shipyard delays, just to be able to get our boats up on dry dock. We've only started working with CARB on compliance extensions, and we're getting ready to dive headfirst into that pool coming up here shortly. But when we have had to work with CARB on engine ordering and being able to stay in the water, continue operating within certain parameters, CARB has been absolutely wonderful to deal with and very understanding. it's you get what you give. And, you know, as long as you're able to lay out a pathway forward that is cohesive, CARB has been absolutely phenomenal. So I don't see any reason why anybody shouldn't be truly happy with the way that CARB is working, as long as the companies are truly putting forth the effort. That's been our experience so far, and we're very grateful to the way that CARB has worked with us on all of those so far.
Gotcha. Okay, then I'm going to take another question here from our Q&A. This is from Chris Gallup, and this is kind of changing gears a little bit. How is the industry doing with all the opacity testing that was required by March 31st? I'm hearing there are issues that haven't been resolved. That's open to our full panel.
I can take that. What we did is we purchased the same meter the state was using and took advantage of getting a couple of our people in the free training. I don't know if they've done it again, but we did it up on the front end. I think the Port of Los Angeles actually sponsored that. So as far as all of our dry stack boats, the process was pretty good. We didn't have any vessel failures. And that included even some boats with some old, not old, but some tier 3 2-strokes, EMDs. But with the wet stack boats, we did run into some issues. And we ended up just sending pictures to CARB, which they accepted. So yeah, we got through it. It was a bit of work. The meter is extremely expensive, but I know there's some people out there doing it. I don't know what they charge. I've heard upwards of $2,000 a boat, but I don't know if that's a fact or not. But the testing itself using the meter and the training was very expensive. You know, by the time we put our guys through it all and then got them out there and took them off the regular jobs and had them do it.
Gotcha, Jerry. And I see Alex, your hand's up as well. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so it was relatively straightforward for us. We ended up using a third party, but we did run into some issues. Could have potentially been a bad situation. When you're doing the snap test, of course you have to run the boat up to full rack, and we can't do that in Ventura Harbor, so we had to go do it underway. And because of the scheduling of the boats and everything, the only time we could do it, it was pretty rough. And we did have one of the techs fell in an injury room. Could have been bad. It was just minor injuries, but it just kind of made it kind of the awareness of it's a potentially dangerous situation. And in the systems that we were using, because we have wet exhaust, and you have to run the exhaust through a pipe that runs overboard, and it was super hot. You know, everyone's wearing welding gear basically to work with that equipment, and so it's potentially dangerous, at least in our situation. I'm sure, you know, we're kind of an anomaly there, but other than that, it was pretty straightforward, and all of our boats passed.
Gotcha. Thanks, Alex. And I see Andrew, you've raised your hand as well. Would you like to chime in as well?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Jerry's comments. So the classes offered by California Council on Diesel Education and Technology were due to a contract with California Air Resources Board. So there were roughly 18 free classes conducted during 2023, and then 6 more in early 2024. That contract came to a conclusion at the end of April this year. The classes should still be available moving forward, but they're not going to be sponsored by CARB, so they'll be available through CDET, the Los Angeles Trade Technical College campus, and their various satellite technical colleges throughout the state. And then to respond to the wet exhaust concerns, CARB Commercial Harborcraft Program has worked with a number of the opacity testing vendors and a number of operators in late 2023 and early 2024, and we developed guidelines for the alternative compliance methods that are available in the Commercial Harborcraft Regulation in subsection K1D and subsection K1E. And so there's also a a new fact sheet attachment 2 that references how to utilize these alternative compliance methods. And that's available on CARB's Commercial Harborcraft website under fact sheets. And that's it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for the
Nick.
comment,
Thanks, Andrew.
Andrew.
Sure.
So with that, that's all the questions we currently have in the chat. So we're going to transition to our next panel now. So I'll give it back over to Dave, who will transition us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. Great job. I want to, just as we're transitioning into the next panel, I just want to call attention to the poll, and I'm going to go ahead and end it. And just note that for those of you who can't see it, I'll be sending around the results in a minute, but just to read to them. The first question was, please select your affiliation category. And we have right at 51% of the parties attending today are from industry. We have 18% of the people attending of 85 or so people that responded, 95 people actually, I'm sorry. Equipment manufacturers, we have one individual that identified themselves as a community member. We have 3 individuals that identified themselves as representing non-governmental organizations. We had 1 person representing a community-based organization, 3 that represent academic institutions, and the other category was 21 people out of 93 responding folks. And regarding the usage of the language channels, as of today thus far, we actually have 100% people attending using the English and none using the Spanish. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and I'll share the results. And with that, let's go ahead and move ourselves on to the next panel and hand it over to Andrew. And you're muted, Andrew.
Hi, thank you, David. Were we planning to take a break, or are we just going to jump into the last panel discussion?
No, we were going to go right into the next panel.
Okay, surprise, surprise. All right, thank you. So my name is Andrew Damiano. I'm the staff air pollution specialist in CARB's freight technology section that implements the commercial hovercraft regulation. So this is our second panel for the third technical working group. This panel is intended to be a discussion of experiences and best practices in dealing with Tier 4 repower projects. And we have today 4 panelists from regulated industry. Let's just go ahead and begin introductions. If the following 4 panelists can please turn their cameras on and unmute themselves. We have Christian Stark, we have Jerry Allen, we have Fred Ellingson, and Zachariah Zink.
I'll start, I guess. I'm Christian Stark. We're Marine Design. We do a lot of marine engineering and design work in the fast ferry fleets on the West Coast.
All right,
yeah,
thank you,
hi,
Christian.
Fred Ellingson, Bay Delta Maritime. I've been here with Bay Delta about 5 years. Before that, been in the marine industry most of my adult life, which is quite a long time, and started working on board vessels, and then moved into the office probably about 2002. I've been working the management side of it since then. So,
thank you, Fred.
Sure.
Go ahead, Zach.
All right. I'm Zachariah Zink. I don't know if you guys can see me or hear me. Hopefully you can. So
Yeah,
I was a chief engineer on tugboats for about 20 years. About 4 years ago, got talked into being a technical superintendent, port engineer for Crowley Maritime. I worked for them as a chief engineer for 5 years previously, and several other companies as a chief engineer on tugboats. So I'm pretty familiar with the tugboat industry and these Tier 4 issues we've had and repowers and new builds. So Jerry's a step ahead of me, but I'm doing my best to learn. He's helped me out quite a bit. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Zach. All right, Jerry, might as well introduce yourself again.
Okay, I'm Jerry Allen. I work for Foss Maritime. We're a 130-year-old company, 130-year-old plus. I've been at Foss for 46 years. I sailed as engineer. I have a 1,600-ton master of tow, captain's license. Worked as port engineer, lead engineer, fleet engineering manager for Foss South and Young Brothers Towing in Hawaii. I have built about 25 boats as either the engineering lead, designer, or boots on the ground guy. 9 of those were Tier 4s. Most recently, I've repowered 2 of our tugs, a 5,000 horsepower Robert Allen 79-footer and a Jensen class, which is very similar to what Sean has at Bay and Delta, and kind of followed their lead, to tell you the truth. I repowered that. It's a 7,000 horsepower boat called the Jamie Renee. So I've had quite a bit of my career was involved in repowers. My first one was in 1999 of a cap and trade program on an EMD. So I've done quite a few.
All right. Well, thank you, Jerry. So I'll just jump right into our questions here. So the first question is for Christian Stark. Christian, what are the design change considerations in the project to repower the Water Emergency Transit Agency's Gemini class fast ferries from Tier 2 to Tier 4 with respect to considerations such as structural design limit, passenger carrying capacity, cooling system modifications, and required diesel exhaust fluid tankage?
Thank you, Andrew. So the vessel's reference is a class of 4 28 knot, 225 passenger catamaran ferries. And they sort of hit the sweet spot in the marketplace right now. So we have a very wide range in equipment that's available, and we have some that's a third the size and the weight, and then you get out of the on-road technology and into the marine only large engine, and it balloons up quite a bit. So the Gemini class was able to hit the sweet spot of 1,400 horsepower engines that had utilizing some on-road technology R&D, and we was able to repower from Tier 2 to Tier 4 without an immense amount of pain. Obviously, in all applications, you've got to review the weight. I would say we have looked into many repowers on the ferries, and I would say almost all of them are extremely challenging, if not impossible, to accommodate the jump in equipment size from Tier 2 to Tier 4. This boat worked out well with the engines that were available. So obviously space and weight are huge factors, especially in the higher speed vessels. In most cases, the SCRs and the DPFs can take up 1 to 2 times the amount of space that the engines require. In the application we did on the Gemini class using the MAN engines, the SCRs are extremely compact, and we were able to fit them in the existing engine room without any additional changes. Those vessels were originally built with third-party aftermarket SCRs, but we actually did not have to use those spaces that the original SCRs were installed in, because we were able to fit everything in the engine room. So it's going back to the previous statement that there is a sweet spot in the marketplace where they're utilizing on-road R&D for that technology, and then it seems to increase about 2 to 3 times once you get outside of that range. So given that we were in the sweet spot, weight gain was not a problem. Space constraints were challenging to make them fit because it was on-road technology that were originally designed to fit into trucks. So their orientation limitations were a little different than what we're used to using in marine, but we were able to make it work. You just had to think about it in a different way. We weren't able, it did not affect the passenger capacity. I would say the Gemini class was a rare instance where we actually went down in weight when we repowered to these Tier 4 engines. I don't think that'll probably happen anywhere ever again. So I don't think that's something. In most cases, you're going to look at a sizable weight increase. And in the larger bore engines we've been dealing with in the ferry fleets, the 4 liter per cylinder range, we've been looking at for SCRs, we've been looking at a 2 to 3 ton addition to the vessel for the SCR, not to mention what the tankage is for the DEF, and the DPFs are a similar size range on top of that. So we had very little modifications required for that vessel. Like I said, hit the sweet spot. It was a very, very specific application. If you're in that 1200 to 1400 horsepower range, there is a solution that is not extremely painful on a 2 liter per cylinder, 12-cylinder engine. We are currently building 2 high-speed catamarans that have those same engines in them with DPFs, because that is EPA certified with a DPF now for the MAN engines. The first of those vessels will be in service beginning of next year. So we're looking forward to that. But in general, I would say, clicking down the list of things to go through in that design process, space is the primary one, which most vessels are extremely challenged with. Weight after that, obviously. The fuel systems don't seem to be any major changes. If anything, I think the Tier 4 engines are slightly more fuel efficient, but it's offset by the weight gain. And in some cases, you got to up the horsepower to deal with the weight gain. So there's that. The DEF systems have been a lot of fun. We've been dealing with DEF now for quite a while. We've got in the fast ferry fleets in the Bay Area, I believe we've got 9 Tier 4 vessels currently in operation, with 2 more coming here in the near future. DEF is, having to switch to stainless steel tanks because the DEF does not agree with aluminum. The fittings are an extreme challenge. DEF does not like to stay in its container. It likes to leak any way it possibly can. Swage lock has been okay. JIC fittings, we've been going to special sealing washers, using Loctite sealing stuff on those in order to get them to seal, but it's a constant maintenance item to keep the DEF system from leaking. I would say, I will say, I don't think we'll ever get it solved. I think it's going to be a constant maintenance item. Cooling has not been a huge change from Tier 4 to Tier 2 to Tier 4. I would say in the seawater cooling system is not a wild change. Airflow in the engine rooms can be drastically increased depending on the vessel. Where we've had dry mufflers, changing out a dry muffler for SCR has not been a drastic increase in cooling requirements. If you had wet mufflers, you didn't have anything like that there, then obviously there's going to be increase in radiated heat in the engine room. You got to account for that with the airflow. We have been able to drop the mufflers in most cases and use the SCR by itself. We have not tried it with the MAN SCR, so that boat already had a muffler in it in addition to the SCR, and it was extra work to take it out, so we left it in. We were able to accommodate it. In the larger MTU SCRs, we've been running with just the SCR, no muffler, and it's been acceptable, no problems. On the new boats that we're building with the SCRs and DPFs, we're not planning any additional mufflers. We're anticipating that the SCR and the DPF will provide enough sound attenuation to get by with that. So I would say it's going down. It's extremely challenging. If you can hit the sweet spot, it works. Other than that, it's been extremely difficult.
All right, thank you. That was a very detailed response.
Yeah.
So our next question here.
I see Alex has got a hand up. I'm not sure. We're taking questions.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, hopefully it's quick answer. I guess it's more to you, Andrew. Because I've also looked at those MANs with the installed DPFs. Is that a CARB approved DPF?
It's actually EPA Tier 4 certified at this point, so it does not need to be CARB verified.
Yeah.
And so the engine in its Tier 4 OEM certified configuration actually does meet CARB's applicable Tier 4 in-use performance standards at its certification level that the engine was actually tested at during EPA certification.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's very strange, Alex. I had asked the same question when we were doing the change order to put those engines in the ferries we had under construction, was because they don't get CARB approved because they're EPA certified.
Right. They're not CARB verified. They're OEM certified.
But they're here. They exist. I saw them in a box about a month ago.
Okay. All right. Well, I might follow you down now. down that path. Thank you.
Sure. All right, the next question is for Jerry Allen. Please describe the vessel design, old Tier 2 engines, and discuss required design changes needed for repowering the Alta June ship assist tug with respect to how Tier 4 engine and SCR system physical characteristics impact fitment, feasibility, and vessel stability, engine cooling system upgrades, and diesel exhaust fluid tankage. And please provide some guidance on how long did this Tier 4 ship assist tug repower project take to complete, and were any incentives utilized?
Okay. It's a lot of questions, Andrew.
Yeah, it is.
I believe you visited the Alta June when we were doing it, didn't you?
I did.
I believe you did. So the Alta June is one of 10 Robert Allen designed Dolphin class vessels we built at our own shipyard in Rainier, Oregon. It was the first vessel that was not Tier 1. It was built and delivered in 2007. So it just happened to line up with the very first Harborcraft rule implementation of tiers. So we struggled a little bit with Tier 2s in the beginning. They didn't ramp up as fast as the Tier 1s, and they smoked. We were able to get through that. We never got past the smoking issue. And they ran successfully up until when I changed these out in 2022. They had 53,000 hours on each main engine. They could have easily gone 100,000 hours. So they were at about half-life, and we took them out and cut them to pieces. As far as physical fitment and stability, that's I'll try to keep it a shorter answer, but the engines, the Tier 4 engine blocks are identical basically in footprint only to the Tier 2s. They're much taller because of the taller aftercoolers. The control panels for the CAT engines tripled in size, as did the DC control boxes. The DC power requirements went up by double. Then we had to make room for the large transfer pump system, which is about, this is a 79-foot boat, which I forgot to tell you. It's very already compressed. It only holds 10,000 gallons of fuel. It's a 60-ton Ballard pull boat. It's not what Sean talks about, his better tanker escorts. These are more ship assist boats. They're smaller, little powerful units, but they don't have tow winches on the back or anything like that. So anyway, we really had a real estate battle. We worked directly with the shipyard, happened to have a design company built right into it. And we went back and forth for 3.5 months to get everything to fit and to get stability where we needed it to get. We had to add a larger air compressor because, one thing people have been forgetting is that if you go with at least I'll say the Caterpillar system, you need to have quite a bit of air to drive the DEF into the SCR unit, which they call a CEM. And you have to have a large air dryer. That was a real challenge, but luckily in the industry, we all kind of end up in the same place. I worked with Fred at Bay and Delta, and he helped me because he'd kind of took the lead on another tug first. So we worked together and came up with things we could fit in our engine room. The CEM itself would not fit in our engine. It couldn't go over the engines like you could on a larger tug. It couldn't go behind them. So we cut the most predominant feature off a tugboat. We cut both stacks completely off the boat and scrapped them out. We put the CEMs vertically. We took the silencers out of the boat, the mufflers, if you will. And we had to put 14-inch exhaust systems in, which we called the Hot Wheel exhaust systems, because in order to keep stability, we had to keep the CEMs very low. So we came out of the engines, made a 360-degree run up into the CEM, and then a 360-degree run into a new, smaller, lighter silencer. And one of these things we do for silencers is their spark arresters, because we also handle tankers. All of us handle tankers, and sparks are bad. So with all of this, of course, there was more steel, bigger stacks. The center of gravity of this boat went up. We worked really hard to track the weights and hired marine architects and stability calculations to just get under the wire with just the CEM. The DEF tank on a small boat that only holds 10,000 gallons of fuel, only has 2 tanks, was probably the biggest challenge. What we ended up doing is the boat had a 500-gallon potable water tank in the middle of the engine room, and we scrapped that out. We put 1,000-gallon black DEF tank like you'd see on a farm in the middle of this engine room, piped it up to the transfer pump system, and made basically little small water tanks back in our Z drive room so the crews could have potable water. During this construction, once the CEMs were in, we did have the DPF guys come down and take a look. We were on our way back together, and they made comments that the DPFs that were set up for these 3512 cats at this horsepower weighed about 10,000 pounds each. We would have needed 2 of them, and they would never fit in what I was doing. And so, you know, we ended up with a lot of weight up high, but we managed to keep it within the stability margins we had to. You know, additionally, we had to completely revise the fuel fill and vent system because we cut the back of the house out, bigger stacks, all that stuff is integral. The fuel filtering systems had to go, whole stack structures all had to be redone. Fixed firefighting system had to be completely revised because it was in way of the new stuff. The fuel shutoffs, the DC electrical systems were all revised. The pilot house access, couldn't even get to the pilot house once we changed the stacks. We had to make modifications to get the ladders up there. The navigation mast and the cradle, when we extended the stacks, you could no longer fit the mast. We had to extend the cradle. Like I said, new water tanks. And it went on and on. The machinery panels had to be all upgraded for the Tier 4s. Getting into the cooling, and talked about the DEF tanks. Well, the cooling was another problem because the Tier 2 coolers and after coolers were far undersized for the Tier 4s. So we bought all new coolers under the boat, 4, and with the new coolers, we had to cut all the structure off that protects them and redo that. The project took 3 months, couple weeks, and then about another week of move in to get it back in service and do the testing. The good part of this project, it was all done in the area it works. That was all done in the Bay Area. It was funded by the Carl Moyer project under the Bay Area Quality Management District. And the incentive to do it was, at the time, we got 95% funding. And that was how we sold that as a business case to our owners. I'd like to say it covered it. It didn't, but we did get through it. So
yeah,
you know, that's the Altitude.
All right. Well, thank you for that response. A lot of detail and information there. Appreciate that.
Hey, Andrew, this is Dave. Just wanted to weigh in for folks that might want to be in the queue or raise their hand. If I could ask a favor of folks, I know Andrew was being accommodating, but we'll go to Q&A after this entire panel is done, so folks can just kind of jot their questions down, even if it feels like an immediate follow-on. That would be great, and that'll just keep us on track. So sorry about that, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, so moving along, our next question is for Fred Ellingson of Bay Delta Maritime. Fred, for the Bay Delta Maritime Fleet, please discuss recommendations and steps Bay Delta has taken with engine and component manufacturers to ensure availability when needed due to manufacturer lead times. And what has Bay Delta found to be a typical repower project timeline for Tier 4 engines in your escort tugs?
Oh, good afternoon. There you go. Mike. Okay. Yeah, the first one maybe we'll get some time back there. That's a pretty quick, short spiel on that. So as everybody knows, lead times on engines are lead times on engines, and there's no real trick to getting through that. It's a challenge, and it's kind of a juggling act. Part of that is, you know, you're not allowed for some of the grant programs, you're not allowed to order or purchase equipment before having a grant contract. So you understand it's, you know, you have a lead time on an engine. but you can't order the engine in time to get the project completed by the project deadline because you can't order the engine until the contract is signed. So that's required us to get some extensions. There's no other way around it. You know, if you have some relationships with shipyards and suppliers, maybe you can get a little bit of improvement on that, but typically it's kind of equal and even for everybody. Whatever the lead times are, unless you manage to find an engine or a cancel order or something like that, you're pretty much stuck with that lead time limit. Typically, the smaller engines, generators, auxiliary engines, lead times seem to be a little bit better, a little bit shorter. But the larger horsepower engines, for the propulsion engines for the tugs that Jerry and Zach and I have to work with, you know, you're better be ready to deal with about a 12-month lead time there, give or take. So that's pretty much it for that. Really, the advice or recommendations is just the more upfront, the more ahead of time you can get of, you know, I mean, I'm talking months and even years in advance of talking to shipyards and suppliers and trying to put deals together. You know, is helpful, but it's still at the end of the day, you know, the engine's not there. The engine's not there. There isn't a whole lot of tricks to it that I've found. So sorry, I've got nothing really encouraging to offer there, but yeah, as far as the project timeline, you know, that for us, you know, I'll just speak to our vessels. So we have these tanker escort tugs, and so it's and we're repowering with same exact engine, same footprint, same horsepower. So that the design and engineering is pretty straightforward. The boats there's pretty good amount of room. You know, we've got a little bit of space to work with. I mean, we're still packing in a lot of equipment into a boat that wasn't designed for it or built around it. So that has to be dealt with. But the engineering part of it is fairly straightforward. There's a lot to do. The light ship weight of these boats are roughly right in around 500 tons. So we've got a lot to work with on stability, you know, with the extra weight we're adding in. The stability process goes pretty smoothly. But everything else that everybody else has addressed, cooling systems, exhaust systems, everything else is a lot of extra work that has to be done. So yeah, but to answer the question, right, so the lead time. So we budget 90 days. That's what we're budgeting for a complete project. That's generators, main engines, and everything from start to finish. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else, yeah, I don't think I can throw much else in there on that. About 90-day project for these tugs that there is space in, but the work is, you know, so the engineering, there's everything ahead of time. I mean, you've got regulatory agencies, you've got shipyard contracts, you've got grants, maybe grant extensions, you have suppliers, different suppliers. You've got to get all that. You haven't even got to the shipyard with the tug yet, and you've had to do all that work. So that all gets done. And then even though the engineering is pretty straightforward with this class of tug, basically the job is to remove everything, all the main equipment, all the major equipment out of the engine room and then replace it. So you're having to remove a lot of just basic plumbing, potable water systems, HVAC systems, MSD systems. You're having to move and remove a lot of equipment just to fit the new equipment in. So the first half of the job is just extracting all the existing equipment, and then you start refitting it back in, and it's really involved and it's a lot of work, and it involves hands-on project management. We've brought in extra staff for us to do these jobs. I mean, these are pretty straightforward. It's a lot of work, but they're pretty straightforward. But you need a hands-on project manager there daily, just to supervise and just to oversee no matter how well planned out it is, you definitely want to have somebody there on a daily basis, coordinating with the project manager in the shipyard, working through all the details to make sure everything's done correctly. And yeah, and they've gone relatively smoothly for us. You know, there's always some hurdles along the way, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Fred. Appreciate that.
Sure.
All right, so our final question is for our last panelist, Zachariah Zink from Crowley Maritime. So Zach, for the Crowley Valor Escort Harbor Tug, please provide a general overview of the Tier 1 to Tier 4 Valor tugboat repower project. How long did the Valor repower take, and were any incentives used? With 3 years of in-use service with Tier 4 engines, what differences in operational characteristics or fuel consumption has Crowley seen with the Valor tug?
Okay, I'll start off by saying that the Valor is pretty much the same class of boat that Bay Delta repowers. It was the first of its class to have a repower from Tier 1 to Tier 4. So there was a learning curve. We kind of shared our experience with our colleagues there to make it easier on them. One big major change, I don't know if they've made it on all their class of boats. We changed it from a keel raw water cooled to a keel cooled boat. So that took a little extra time. But like Fred was saying, I mean, the 3516s we dropped in, they're the same engine. And as Jerry said, they're a little taller because of the aftercoolers and improvement on putting out emissions. The big on that boat, it's a decent sized boat, so we found room for the SCRs and our exhaust systems. I saw the Alta June and it was a complete nightmare. I don't know how Jerry pulled that one off, but he did. As far as how long it took, it was about 100 days. I was there about 80% of the time, kind of managing things. Like Fred touched on, you had to move a lot of systems, cooling systems, MSD systems, water, potable water systems. We had to convert our stern ballast tanks. We just basically turned them into half ballast tanks, half DEF tanks, and you got to coat them. And there's quite a process of making all that happen, and a lot of extra equipment to add, and making sure everything works correctly. It's a long process, and yeah, you got to be at the yard all the time, make sure everything goes correctly. It was a challenge, but it turned out real good. The boat runs good. Fuel consumption wise, the new engines get better fuel consumption. They do. So we haven't seen a real big change on that. DEF is about $3 a gallon, so that's an added cost. We go through quite a bit of it. The main issues we've been having is keeping the DEF systems running correctly. We run into a lot of problems of, it's new technology, newer in this capacity, and our engineers and engineering staff, aren't really familiar exactly how everything works, So getting things to work and work correctly, we talk to NT and Peterson Power quite a bit. Parts aren't cheap. So we're trying to train our staff into using programs like CAD-ET and put them through classes on how to work with this newer technology that nobody's familiar with, So it's been an expensive learning curve for us, I have I'm in charge of 6 tugboats, and 4 of them are Tier 4. We're having the same DEF issues, DEF issues on all 4 vessels, and it's definitely a learning curve, and we're getting the hang of it. We're getting everything tuned in, but it's a costly venture. And as far as the DPF filters, I don't know where we put them on our smaller vessels, to tell you the truth. You know, the questions that were raised about back pressure and definitely a fire hazard and crew safety. You know, I'd just like to see proof that they're safe and we're all on the same page here before we start slapping them on our boats and trying to find a room for them. I mean, who's going to pay for them? OEM manufacturers checking off on them, you know. I know that wasn't one of the questions, but yes, we did get a grant for the repower of the Valor.
All right.
That's a good point, Zach. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but I should have made a point that the DEF systems are a big, it's all brand new technology, myself included, and we haven't seen it before. It's quite a bit of additional equipment and to operate and to maintain and to understand and to make it work. And there's been a lot of learning curve and tuning to make them function properly. And then also the crews have to be trained too. And if you don't mind, one more point I'm glad you made there is the one thing I was trying to communicate is that, yeah, these Valor class tugs, it's pretty straightforward deal. And these boats are fairly well suited to this type of retrofit. And it's a huge job. And these boats are fairly well suited to it. I couldn't imagine, you know, if you had something like Jerry's had to deal with, like you said, it's a big challenge and it's a big job, and these tugs are fairly well suited to taking this new equipment. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me interrupt. Sorry.
Not a problem. Yeah, like I was saying, the Valor class it's a bigger boat. You know, there's a lot more room in the engine rooms, but I have 3 of these report class.
It's a 100-foot tug, isn't that correct? Compared to the 79 for the Alta June.
Yeah, and I have 3 report class. They're brand new boats. I got 3 of them built within the last 3 years, and they're 79-foot boats. They're 8,000 horsepower. They pack little boats to pack a lot of punch, but there's that being said, you know, where the SCRs are halfway up the stack, and I don't even know where we'd put a DPF filter, to tell you the truth. That'd be a tough one for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, I just don't know where we'd put it. You know, the dimensions and the especially if you have active ones that draw on the bigger engines, they draw like 54 kW, and that's, if we were running those DPF filters that are active, we'd have to parallel our generators just to power the boat and the filters. So that means you're running 2 generators instead of 1, and I just don't see how that's a good application. Okay. Now passive ones, you know, I'd have to read up more on them, but that also involves injecting fuel after the SCR to scrub the DPF filter, and at 1,000 degrees squirting diesel fuel into it, you know, it doesn't, I'm not sure it sounds too safe to me, to be honest with you, you know, as my time as an engineer, you know, thinking about it in the mechanical and engineering aspect.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your response, Zach. It was very detailed.
Not a problem.
So it looks like we're a little ahead on time here. I believe we can open up the Q&A, see what type of questions that we may have. I don't see any at this time. Does anybody?
I answered 2 online.
Oh, you did?
Zach was talking. Sorry, Zach, I had to. It was about back pressure and lead times on engines.
Well, we're supposed to read those out before we answer them. So, yeah, let me see. Answer 19.
So the first question was from Michael Epstein. This is Dave, and that question was, have you had back pressure problems with the SCR and DPF devices?
Okay. Yeah, I see it there.
Jerry responded, only 1 engine on the repowers I did. We believe we broke a baffle in the silencer, taking it in and out. The second question was from Vincent McDonald. And that was, what is the lead time on equipment for Alta June? And Jerry responded, ordered a year prior. They came in 4 months late. Supply chain issues were the blame.
So 16 months roughly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Those were 3512E engines, if I recall.
yeah, and we did everything in the middle of COVID, and I think that should be taken with a grain of salt. I mean,
Right.
everybody suffered. The supply actually was COVID was ending, but the supply chain issue was not. So Cat did the best they could. Every engine we ordered for, I did 4 repowers in 2 years, some tier 3 boats too, in the Bay Area, and every one came in 3 to 6 months late, and I'm sure Fred and everybody else saw the same thing. I mean, we were all beating up the vendors, but I don't think it was really them.
Yep.
Andrew, there is an additional question just came in from Dory Chandler, if you've got that up.
Sure, let me open that again. Let's see, this question is directed at Zach Zink. Zach, what tier were the engines that your 3 new tugs were? And what was the availability of higher tier engines during ordering of these engines?
So the 3 new tugs we built within the last 3 were all built to tier 4 specs. We're built at Diversified Marine. It is the Artemis, the Athena, the Apollo, and the Hercules before that. So they're all tier 4 certified engines. Boats.
Okay.
Yep.
Could we discuss a little bit of new build stuff here? Do we have time?
Let's see, are there any more questions? I don't see any at this time. I see Christian Stark has his hand up. Christian, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I thought there was one question on there about back pressure issues, and I would say with the SCRs, we haven't seen any back pressure problems with the OEM SCRs to date in any of the, whatever it is, 9 boats we have running with them. DPS we don't have running yet, but we'll know soon. The man ones will be, like I said, running beginning next year, and they are passive, no fuel injection or anything, just exhaust heat to burn them out.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. Appreciate that.
So I don't see any other questions in the Q&A at this time, Andrew. So if there were other items that you wanted to pose to the panelists, or other items the panelists wanted to speak to, we certainly have time right now.
Yeah, it sounded like Jerry was definitely interested in providing some information about at least Foss's new build tier 4 tugs. So it looks like we do have some time to introduce that discussion, but we do not have any prepared questions regarding that topic.
So I have a finding. I think we should all talk about it, or at least put it on the table. We're building boats that are just very similar to what Zach's running. It's kind of this class of Robert Allen tugs that are going to be 95 tons, 3516 Caterpillar engines, pretty well-known design. I don't know how many Robert Allen has done, but there's probably hundreds and hundreds of them around the world. And what's happening here is since there are no DPFs available for this, and believe me, we're working with the guys trying, but we're calling this and our new barge DPF ready. That's our little buzzword in our engineering group, because we're trying to make provisions for a device that doesn't exist in our world right now. I mean, we've seen suggestions of how big it'll be, but without approvals or anything else, we know that could change. It could be bigger, it could be smaller, it could take more power, it could take less, but the power is what I want to talk about. So in these active systems, we are planning on 58 kW to drive the DPFs. Now that's 2 generators and 2 main engines, the power load for the toasters to burn the silver. The issue comes, and Zach can verify this, as can Fred. A ship assist tug goes out and it runs 1 generator to run its big bow winch, its hotel loads, its compressors, its fans, everything else. We run 1 compressor. We have another engine for redundancy. Yeah, we might even have another for hotel loads, a smaller one, 65 kW. I know some of Fred's boats are like that. Some of our boats are like that. We all have the same class of boat by the same designer. We've just done the load analysis on these boats, and typically we have a 99 kW to 150 kW generator on a tug. We're going to 175 kW generators. They're cats, they're C1, C.1s, 7.1s, or a John Deere 6068 won't do it. So it's a 6090. We have to embiggen our engines over the standard. And now, because of the load analysis, we now have to run 2 generators whenever we're working with the main engines ready. So what we've done by writing this DPF rule in here, and if you use an active system that, mostly came from you guys, I was part of the process of how we decided which ones would work in tugboats, but it seems like we're stepping on our foot here. Now we're going to have twice the maintenance. We're going to have bigger engines. We're going to have twice the emissions. We're going to burn twice the amount of depth. This is just on our generators. I'm not saying anything about the mains, but I think we made a mistake. And I think we need to look at this because it's pretty basic math to figure this out. If the DPFs are going to take this kind of power, that's 58 kW is a lot of power even to a tugboat. When you're talking 99 kW to 150 kW generator. So what do we do, Andrew? What do you think? I mean, this is
Well,
this is a
what I would say is that I would ask you if you've had any dealings with Net Technologies and Ripos that are currently pursuing carb verifications for these devices. They would be able to provide you with the specifications, the dimensions, and the mass of these devices based on your engine horsepower, your exhaust mass flow. And then additionally, you're going to have to, these things, but you would have to consider, the actual duty cycle that you're operating these vessels at, and then the frequency at which the DPFs would need to be regenerated. And so that's something that I think the DPF manufacturers would be able to provide more insight on, and I don't have them here in this meeting at this moment.
But I do. And we are working with, our designers, Robert Allen and Eastern Shipbuilding now is doing our design work. They're collaborating. Mm-hmm. That's where these numbers are coming from them. So, I invite, and I've reached out to Ripos a couple of times, but I invite them.
Well, I don't necessarily think that the DPFs are going to be regenerating continuously, and it does depend on, which DPF unit you're utilizing, right? So, and then it also depends on your back pressure as far as how many modules would be regenerated at a time. But that's starting to get a little bit technical for this conversation at this point. I see that a number of other folks have raised their hands to discuss this topic. So I'm not sure who raised their hand first. Christian, do you want to go ahead?
I can. I think Alex actually.
Actually, Alex.
Alex. Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Well, it's actually a different topic. I know I don't want to interrupt Jerry's topic, but I totally agree about the DPF. The first iterations that I saw were from Ripos were a 50 kW regen requirement, and for us it was just not even possible. Again, we have a little 12 kW genset. So but my question is for Christian. How was dealing with Coast Guard and the DEF systems?
It was
specifically for the aluminum hull because of the corrosion issues with DEF and aluminum.
We had to go to stainless steel tanks, some non-integral tanks for the DEF because they can't put it in the aluminum tanks. I suppose you could look at coating them, but generally the tanks on the day boats are small enough that it's a little difficult to try and get into coating those things. So they're all non-integral stainless steel tanks to address that. We have had DEF leakage, haven't seen any massive wastage or anything shocking on the aluminum boats related to that. We have had some issues with the fittings used because there's a standard for the automotive industry that uses a plastic O-ring fitting that works very well, but for Coast Guard on these boats, a little bit challenging because it probably fail it with a lighter and it would, cost about 15 cents. So we end up putting swage lock fittings onto the automotive fittings to get them to something a little more durable. So other than that, it's been fine. No major issues there, no major hurdles with Coast Guard other than fitting challenges.
No, if I can jump in there real quick, I've had constant problems with our line fittings, and JIC had to switch to Swedge locks. They leak constantly, and as far as switching half of our ballast tanks to DEF tanks, we did do a coating in there. It's a rubberized coating that works really well. Haven't seen any deterioration. The tanks look good in its last dry dock. So that is possible if you do have a tank you could turn into a DEF tank, you know, instead of external tanks.
Yeah, we have had luck on the JIC fittings with a, like I said, a sealing washer that's got a Loctite product on it. That seems to be working. Other than that, Swage lock and yeah.
All right,
No,
I see that Fred has his hand up too. Thank you for your patience there, Fred.
No problem. Actually, I had a question for Christian Stark, just because he seems pretty well informed, a little bit further along, and I heard him mention something, and this is just kind of a random question for Christian or anybody.
Okay.
And maybe have an opinion or even actual some information, but so the passive DPF systems, so I'm thinking like of our operations, like especially like Zach and Jerry and I, so it relies on exhaust temp to burn off the soot. So for a ferry, for you, you're fine. You're running at a pretty high load majority of the time. You're generating some exhaust heat. Passive system may or may not work okay there. But for a tug that's operating in the harbor and running at very low loads a majority of the time, I wonder if a passive system is even feasible or would even work.
So we're very lucky with the ferries that we know exactly what the routes are, which I realize you guys have no knowledge. You have no way of knowing what the boats are going to be doing. So we're able to look at that and figure out exactly where we are. It depends. The manufacturer says they've got some barges operating in Europe that go downriver at very low loads, and they've gone 3 days without a problem before they really get the engines loaded up. Don't know. I have not seen that in person. I'm not sure. We'll know for sure next year how that actually works out in reality. But yeah, that's
one of the things I wanted to introduce into this conversation here briefly is that you know, with the higher tier level engine, you're going to have reduced engine out PM, and so that's going to reduce the soot accumulation rates and any diesel particulate filter after treatment. And then that's depending on the type of catalyst used and the wash coat loading of catalyst metals, platinum group metals, and the engine load factor and the duty cycle, how you're operating the boat. That's going to have a big impact on how frequently the system would need to regenerate. So that's why I was pointing to some of the after treatment OEM companies that could potentially provide more input on this.
And going back to Andrew, I know you didn't want to get too deep into the details. We looked at a quad engine fast ferry using some of the systems that Jerry was talking about, and we were looking at about 100 kW in electrical load for the DPFs for the main engines and the generators, which was, you know, for a vessel that carries around 100 kW generators, it's pretty hard to have 100% swing in electrical loads. We were looking at actually having to do some hybrid power generation off the engines to power those things up, because we couldn't have a 200 or 250 kW generator spending most of its life at 70 kW. Is not really a good place for them. And in that regard, the manufacturer won't, at that time, they wouldn't interlock the DPFs, so they wouldn't all go off at the same time. And they said if there was an error, they would all go into 100% regeneration all the time. So you kind of had to plan for 100% regeneration, even though it should rarely happen, if ever.
Okay. It looks like we actually have a RIPOS representative here in the audience. David, is Peter Ellison prepared to enter the discussion here?
I have opened up his line. He needs to go ahead and self-unmute. So there he goes.
All right.
Yeah, hi, Andrew. This is Peter Ellison from RIPOS. I just wanted to add that, you know, a lot of the talk has been regarding the power requirement. And we have, you know, what our initial, when we first started, you know, looking into this early on, We only can go by what we're doing on the land or truck side of things, because with marine being a new segment, there's going to be a learning curve for us DPF manufacturers as well. But on average, if we're looking at under 600 kW, power requirements on our systems are typically 4 to 8 kW. When we get into the larger over 600 kW, and then based on the systems, currently, we've never had the need to sync our ECUs so that they manage the regens. And that's something that's not that difficult. That's just going to take real-time practice to do that. And without any test platforms, we can only give the conservative answer. But we feel very confident that we would be able to reduce the loads that we've been given, that we've been giving as far as information for initial information, cut that in half at least. So I just wanted to add that before the load situation gets a little bit out of hand.
Well,
All right.
hey,
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Peter, Jerry, we've met obviously, and we can only design for what we're being told right now. While the boat's being designed, we have to submit all this to the American Bureau of Shipping and Coast Guard. Everybody's reviewing it. So it came from you guys that this is the load we could see, and we don't have a choice unless you guys could provide something different. And this came from you to Robert Allen, and this is how we're building. So is my numbers off? Or I've seen these numbers. So
no, Jerry, it's not off. It's just, I can't give information without having either tested or having done it yet. Theoretically, it's not all that difficult, especially with the decrease in the PM soot load in Tier 4 engines. But in experience, in the 20 plus years that we've been doing it, we haven't had the need to sync our ECUs or to put regens into any kind of a sequence to only have one regen at a time. So if that's something that we'll have to work a little bit more on getting you some better information in our feasibility to be able to do that. But I feel pretty confident that we could, that we are going to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
thank you.
All right. So Jerry, did you have any additional topics that you wanted to discuss regarding new builds?
No, it's
go ahead.
the basic part we're fine. It's all about the DPFs, Andrew. It really is.
Okay.
Challenges.
Okay. All right. I'll hand it back over to you, David, unless there's any more questions in the Q&A here.
Nope,
I don't see any.
Do not appear to be. So thank you to all for who had weighed in. So at this point in time, as folks can see on the slide, we're going to move on to closing remarks and then adjourn our meeting. So Babak, I'll hand things over to you.
Oh, yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Babak Pozakifar, manager of Corp's Freight Technology section. We have reached the conclusion of our third and final workshop for 2024. Organizing this event has been a collaborative effort, and I want to express sincere gratitude to all involved. I extend our deepest thanks to the U.S. Coast Guard's District 11 and the Marine Safety Center for their ongoing support and coordination in implementing California commercial hovercraft regulations. Our panelists' contributions have been invaluable, and we appreciate them taking time out of their busy schedule to participate. Also, a special thank you to Corp staff, Nicole White-Densberger and Lizzie Melgoza, for their tireless work in coordinating outreach efforts. We have covered a substantial amount of information today, and I hope you found this session informative and insightful. Thank you for joining us, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Dave, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sunny. So just a few reminders as we close things out. Again, we saw this slide earlier, but should folks have comments that you would wish to provide, CARB welcomes those as noted in that final bullet. Please submit your comments as early as possible, but certainly no later than August 31st of this year. Please send those comments to the email address on the screen, which is, for those of you that do not see that, harborcraft@arb.ca.gov. And please put technical working group in the subject line. Next slide, please. And again, should you have an interest in staying up to date on program updates, again, on your screen, you can see a way to get email notifications on the URL that is listed, and you can select the Harborcraft, commercial Harborcraft activities list, and then you will be getting regular updates as they are generated. I want to give a quick thank you as well to our interpreters, Carlos and Grisel. Thank you very much. They are sort of the unsung heroes working in the background. So thank you as well to them. And with that, unless there are any other comments, I want to go ahead and thank everybody once more time for your attendance. We maintained a very lengthy list throughout the entire day, so I'm glad we were keeping everybody engaged. With that, we are adjourned. Everybody have a lovely evening and a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. See you, Zach, Fred, Sean, Corey.
Bye, Ed. Bye, Jerry. Bye,
Thank you,
Fred.
everyone.
Thank you very much.